Dear Edit, last night, I finally went on a date with this guy who's been asking me out for the past couple of months. He took me to a weight loss seminar. What's your what the fricking frick is this moment in your dating history? Went out with a girl for a first date. She took me to a Kumdo lesson, which is a Korean sword fighting sport. I thought that was cool, but it was an advanced class and I made somewhat of a fool of myself, but all in good fun. Anyway, it turned out that she was bringing me there because she wanted me to be part of a documentary about foreigners in Korea. So my looking like a fool was broadcast nationwide. We then visited the Grandmaster's house for Makiali and the film crew started interviewing me. They were basically focusing on my relationship with the girl I was going out with. They didn't seem to understand it was a first date. So here I am trying to answer awkward questions without embarrassing both of us on national television. There's bad dates. Then there's nationally televised bad dates. There was a guy who had been asking me to hang out for a while and I finally said yes. He wanted to hang out at his house with his roommate, so I went. He took me into the basement where there was a dirty mattress on the floor and nothing else. I ran. To this day I have no idea what it was about, but I ran and never told anyone about it until now. Finally someone with common sense. Your brain says run and you did. Good for you. When I was a teenager I worked at a retail store in the mall and a guy who worked a few stores down would always come in and talk to me. He was super sweet and genuine and would randomly take me to lunch, bring me coffee and the like. It was nice to just have someone to talk to and who seemed genuinely interested in me and what I had to say. He asked me on a date a few times and I always declined. I don't like the idea of dating someone who I work next to, just in case it goes sour. After a month or two I finally agreed to go on a date with him. Because good guys are hard to find, I couldn't just let him pass by. He picks me up at my house and on our way to dinner we get into a car accident. The driver's side was T-boned pretty badly and we ended up having to go to the hospital where he contacted his roommate, who then contacted my date's girlfriend. I must know what happened when his girlfriend found out he got in a car accident taking another woman out on a date. After my freshman year of college I met a guy on OkCupid and we went to get dinner at Fridays as our first date. Offered to give me a ride, but I said no. He was a couple years older, well dressed and started talking about how he'd started his own business after college and it was going well. Good for him. Bragging a bit, but hey, that's an accomplishment. So after we order he says let's play a game. We'll each take out our wallets and compare what's in them. Wasn't a joke. Literally started showing me his credit cards and bragging about the high limits. Ending with clearly you can't afford to pay for this dinner, but don't worry I can cover you. I was pissed and protested but he wouldn't take no for an answer. So as we leave he says he wants to show me his car. Unfortunately it was before mine in the lot so I had to walk by it. It was a white, windowless serial killer van. He begged me to frick him in it, right there in the Fridays parking lot. I was pretty glad I drove separately. Hopefully I won't need to do dating again ever, but if I do, your story has made me decide that if I do I will take my own transport. A guy I had met 3 days previously offered to pick me up and hang out. I was cool with that, but he ended up dragging me around on errands. We went to his dentist appointment, and then when I said I wanted to leave, he said he'd give me a ride home but only in exchange for a BJ. I was pretty scarred about dating after that, and no, I didn't give him a BJ. I got out right there and walked to a bus stop. I went on a date with a guy that I met online. He told me to dress nice and that he was going to take me out for dinner. He took me to Subway, ordered a foot-long teriyaki chicken sub. He looked at me and said, "I hope you like teriyaki chicken." We shared the sub in his car. Safe to say there was no second date. Went to pick a girl up at her house after meeting on a dating website. She seemed significantly larger than her photo, but only in the lower abdominal region. This is when I realized that she had failed to mention that she was pregnant. Guy I worked with kept asking me out. I continuously said no. After about a year, I started to feel bad for the guy and said yes to a date. He asked me to lunch so I figured it could be a quick easy date. He picked me and took me to Wendy's, where he made me order off the dollar menu, and I could only get 2 things. After this very quiet lunch where he hunkered over his chicken nuggets like I would steal them, he said he needed to stop at Walmart. We go in and he heads to the lotion section. Strange, but what ifs. He then grabs 2 scented lotions and asks which one I like better. Being nice, I pick one, and he responds with, "Great. I'll use this for your massage." Oh, luckily I had to work in 2 hours and told him the massage would have to wait. I spent the next 3 months trying to avoid him until he quit. I met this cute girl in college. I asked her out a couple times. She was really into me. Numerous occasions we sat in a coffee shop for 6, 7, 8 hours talking the night away, but couldn't do anything about it as she was seeing someone else. Okay, fair enough. I'm a little persistent. We hang out on and off. 6 months later, after she and her significant other break up, or so I was told, we start seeing each other. Fast forward 8 months and she's at my place 6, 7 days a week. Has taken over half my condo with her stuff. We commute to work together. I'm having supper with her parents. Always hanging out with her sisters and their boyfriends. She's always over at my parents'. Things are going really well. I was crazy about her. Part of the family and all that good stuff. About a week before Christmas she sits me down and basically says that she never really broke up with her boyfriend. He was just out west. He was coming home and we were over. She was just seeing me on the side and quite frankly didn't understand why I wasn't seeing someone else at the same time, seeing how we weren't all that serious. Excuse me, what? Wow, how low can you go? That's just pure evil. At least you're not with her. I had a guy take me to a beer and Christ thing. He was uber Catholic and thought I could benefit from letting Christ into my cold Jewish heart. So I go. I'm open-minded. I'm only half Jewish and have always been interested in other religions. It was going okay until the priest, the speaker of the night, told us a hypothetical tale of our brother who is paralyzed. We have the ability to cure him with stem cells. He will walk as soon as the transaction is complete. How many of you here would purchase these stem cells and allow your brother to walk again? My hand shoots up. I look around the room. Nothing. No hands. I then notice everybody staring at me, including my date and the priest. I was blessed out like nobody's business and was told I was an embarrassment to my date. Good times. Not sure how long ago this was for you. If it was recently, you could have pointed out to everyone there that stem cell research and treatment no longer requires the use of fetal stem cells, and in fact, can be done with stem cells from an adult. Then ask the priest and everyone present who wouldn't donate their own stem cells to save their brother. Science is pretty awesome. On my first date with a guy off an internet dating site, he took us to the Scientology Museum in London. I thought original, easy to find things to talk about, laugh at the craziness of, this could be fun. Then he proceeded to read every single piece of writing on every single exhibit, ask the attendant very probing questions about how one goes about joining Scientology, etc., and sounding slightly too interested to just be intrigued about a religion. Also, he was visibly sweating. Once we were done there, we went for a glass of wine and he told me he used to shoot I was out of there like a shot. When I was young and stupid, I dated a guy with a temper. He would get mad about something stupid like saying goodbye too quickly on the phone, pick a fight and we'd break up. He would call a day or two later and we would make up. After a few months I had figured out the cycle and I was fed up. So, when he picked a fight as usual, I ended it and then didn't take him back. While we were dating, I had become close with his sisters and his mom loved me. We had scheduled a girls' lunch and his sister begged me to go. I finally said yes and went. Everything was fine and I had a great time. The whole lunch was probably 2 hours long. At the end I walked to their car with them and the mom grabbed me and said, "Hear him." Out of the car comes her son, WTF, who was trying to explain to me why we should be together. I just walked past him to my car as he ran after me. He ended up picking a fight with me because it was my fault we broke up and I didn't even call him so he could fix it. Then he threw rocks at my car as I drove away. I wish I had a picture of what my face looked like when he came out of that car. I never spoke to him again and never accepted another invitation from his family. Sounds like his family didn't realize how crazy he was. He probably treated his mom and sisters as badly as he treated you. Oh no, that would be so hilarious if I wouldn't feel bad for you. The only fricked up moment was when my date was on the phone for quite a while talking to her friends that I didn't know. It was quite boring, obviously. It even got to the point that the old lady who had coffee next to our table in the restaurant told me that back in her day, the guys would have not accepted that behavior from their dates. Not that I want to relive the old days, but I heeded her advice. Dang, that old lady just called you a bee. I'm sure this has happened to everyone who has dated online. I met a guy online who seemed really nice. We exchanged a few emails and got along well enough, so we decided to meet up for a matinee. We exchanged pics so that we could add each other at the theater where we were meeting. I show up, expecting to see the heavy-set dude around my age because that's what his profile and pic said. Instead, he was about 20 years older and 100 pounds heavier than his picture. I am a fairly open-minded person when it comes to dating, and I know that men are folks embellish, but come on. We watched our movie in silence and politely parted ways. I thought you were meeting up for a manatee and was like, whoa, what a cool date. There's been a few, but the absolute worst was the woman who turned up to the pub with literally no money, expecting me to buy her drinks and dinner. I wouldn't have minded if she'd have told me beforehand, but this was completely out of the blue. So anyway, we sat there making awkward conversation, or at least I tried to start a conversation, told her about my life, asked her questions. She was too busy texting and phoning her friends to really take notice. So eventually we did get talking. And then out of nowhere, she told me that she killed her dog. Not accidentally either. I just upped and left and avoided all contact. That was 2 years ago. Jenny, how do I get out of this lol? Tell him you killed her dog lol. Had one. Not really a date though. A few years back in high school. Socially awkward, lanky, weird English guy called Derek. We were friends in the same group and in the same maths class. He had the hots for me for a while. He kept hinting at dating and seeing a movie. All my guy friends asked me to give him a chance. He's not that bad. Blah blah. I decided not to date him but to try and be more accepting of him, even though he kinda gave me the creeps. And hopefully if we were just friends he would get the message and leave me alone in the creepy sense. I invited him around to my place for video games and a few rounds of pool. However, I made sure my dad was home as Derek didn't make me feel all that comfortable for some reason. Anyway, we take turns at THPS2 and head down to the garage for a few rounds of pool. I whip his butt at pool and he realizes he needs to get home. I see him to the door and say goodbyes and we have a brief hug. As I pulled away from the hug, he grabbed me by the wrists quite hard. Derek, please reschedule. Please kiss me. Me dude. What are you doing? Let me go. Derek holding my wrists tighter and now hurting me. Please, please, I've never been kissed. Please, me WTF Derek. Let me go. By this point he's trying to bring me closer to him and puckering up for a kiss, still keeping a really strong and painful grip on my wrists. I'm squirming trying to get away from him. He was really strong though. Me let the frick go or I am calling down my dad. Derek, you wouldn't dare. Please. Just kiss me. Me darad. Come here. I swear. I've never seen a boy move faster out of a door than Derek did then. My dad chased him down the road calling him every name under the sun. Last I heard about him he had been done for physical assault. This is the point where you don't feel bad for kicking a guy in the balls. So I went on a couple dates with this girl and she was giving me some signs that she was ready to get a little physical. So I lean in close and try to kiss her, and she turns her face away from me. Stunned, I end up going home and thinking it was over between us. Later on, she contacts me and starts hinting we should go out again. I decide to go for it. Again, after getting some heavy hints, and she pushes me away. So now I just ask, what's going on? She says, I am on dates with you so I don't feel like I'm undesirable, but I'm not attracted to you. She called me the next day and I told her I'm not dating people who make me feel undesirable, then hang up. You may have just solved one of the biggest mysteries of my life. I am going to assume I was once in the same situation as you. In college, this guy from one of my classes asked me to go out with him out of the blue. We'd never even talked before, but he was pretty cute so I said sure. We exchanged numbers and he said he'd call me with details. He called the next day and told me we were going to a restaurant that was way out of my price range. We're talking like no way will this bill will be under $100. I tried talking him out of it, and when that didn't work, flat out saying I couldn't afford something like that, but he insists and tells me not to worry. This all really should have been a clue to me. So I say fine and agree to go. We get to the restaurant and the waiter comes over and I go to order the cheapest thing on the menu when he stops me and says ignore her. We're both having the steak, but I don't like steak. She's just saying that because she's poor. We'll have steak, and shoos the waiter away. I'm mortified and pee and want to leave, but he was my ride. He tries to make conversation and just proves to me that he really isn't, but then he says he has to go to the bathroom and leaves. I'm sitting there for a good 10 minutes. Before he texts me, hahaha, I got the shoots from drinking last night, don't eat without me. That was the last straw. I called the waiter over, pay for my meal, and go to the Starbucks down the street to call my friend to pick me up. TL. Dr. Guy was trying to impress me and was the world's biggest butt. I paid for just my meal, not his, and I'm well aware I didn't owe him anything. I just wanted to make a clean break from this guy. WTF. The guy sounds like he's 12. A girl I had just met asked me out. She wanted to take me to dinner. We end up at this little Italian place. She says she knows someone that works there. When our waiter arrives, he appears visibly shaken, stuttering. She introduces me to him. This is her friend she mentioned before. I can see it right away. This guy has a thing for her, and here she is introducing him to her date. She then bugs him for special orders and asks if we can get our meals free. He really seems upset, but gives her the anything for you look and agrees. I decline and pay for my own meal. I felt really bad for this guy. I could just see his torment at watching this girl date someone else. She was very attractive and very friendly. I assumed he just got friend-zoned. I hung out with her a few more times, but backed off of the romantic part. Then I found out that the guy from the restaurant was her ex-boyfriend, who she had just dumped a few days before and had been dating since high school. This was 2-3 years after I graduated. TL. DR. Girl tried to get her recent ex-BF to serve me free food. I was already cringing before I got to the bit about being an ex-boyfriend. My god, that's just... So I'm working at Borders. This was around the time that it had just gone into voluntary administration in Australia, and I'm chatting to a customer for a bit about how I am trying to find work as a freelance graphic designer while finishing up uni. She mentions to me that she might have some work for me. I give her my card and think I've totally found a new client. She invites me to a local coffee shop to chat, and I'm really excited about some prospective work. During our coffee chat, she asks me what I do. Okay, she must have forgotten, I thought. I told her I do graphic design and she goes, ooh cool. I used to do graphic design too, but I don't need to do that anymore. This is where I think, hang on, why is she even talking to me? So she pretty much was trying to recruit me to pretty much become her lackey and sign up for a pyramid scheme, where I can sell vitamins and whatnot. Get people I know to work for me and earn even more money and get cool crap like holidays and loads of money and gift cards and clothes and everything. But she just would not stop selling it to me. I regret giving her my card. I got a text from her the other day saying that we should catch up. Yep, number. So pretty much, this friend of yours seems to be milking every single acquaintance he knows. Acquaintances are good because they are not close friends, but they are still connections. This lady I met seemed to wave to a lot of people, so I'm assuming she had tried to poach them from their monotonous retail jobs as well. Honestly, the best thing to do is just ignore his texts and emails and whatnot. Works a charm. A few years ago, my wife and I were invited over to a friend's house for drinks. He fortunately decided to warn me a day or two before the event that it wasn't just for drinks, but wouldn't say what it was. We knew he dabbled in Amway, so we figured we were in for the sales pitch. It was also supposed to be a group gathering of 10-12 people, and we thought we could sneak into the back, make an appearance, and leave, as if we were the targets. We were the only invitees. So we arrived 2 hours late, and the Amway people were all sitting on the couch just waiting for us. We had to sit through the entire presentation, pretend to be interested, and pretend not to notice that the woman presenting was a complete psycho. She kept saying that she was right at the top of the organization, pulling in the big bucks, and she is only doing this presentation as a favor to James to get his business started. We finally managed to leave without committing to anything. James called me later and told me he was dating the woman, and she insisted he let her give a presentation. It all ended well when they were at a restaurant a few months later, got into a fight, and she stabbed him in the arm with a fork. That was the end of Amway. Unfortunately, I doubt that was truly the end of Amway, although I love the thought. So anyway, she stabs him, and then Amway caught fire. Back in high school, there was a very beautiful girl named Melissa in a few of my classes. This was the mid to late 90s, and pregnant teenagers weren't as common as they are now, so I think it added to her mystique that she had a child. It never bothered me, though. I just thought she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. So, any chance I got to be around her, I took it. She needed a tutor? Check. Someone to talk to? Check. I never had the guts to ask her out, though. I wasn't much of a looker myself in high school, so it took me a pretty darn long time to do it. Finally, I did, and she said yes. I can't remember how it went down, but I think we decided that I'd pick the restaurant. She'd pick something else to do. So, she shows up with her sister. That should have been my cue to nope it back inside my house. But, I didn't, because I was an idiot. We went to eat, and then she said she had a surprise for me that she thought I'd really enjoy. I was excited. Did she really plan something? We pull up to a small convention center and start to head in. I'm already starting to WTF it when we make our way towards one of the rooms, and there it is. Clear as day on a sign out front of the door. Amway. I cannot describe my internal anguish and feelings of absolute fail during the lecture and the meetup afterwards. They didn't even sit with me. We'd arrived late, and they moved to open seats on one side while I sat on the other. I barely remember how I answered the inundation of Amway people's questions, but somehow I made it through the evening. I remember never even seeing Melissa or her sister during this time, and as we finally met up to go home, I was utterly destroyed. We got home. She looks me dead in the eyes and tells me that she had a really nice time tonight. I echoed the sentiment, told her sister it was nice to meet her, and went inside. Never even looked at Melissa again. So my friend scored a date with a girl he'd had a crush on for years. A super hot crush with a strict and religious family. He tells me he needs me to come on a double date because she will only go out with him if her cousin can come along. Well, off we go, and her cousin is surprisingly hot too. This favor seems to be working out in my favor. The plan is to start with an Irish picnic on the private beach. We sat on benches and drank a beer. My date has one beer and starts to act odd. She tells me I'm so good looking. She's whispering and giggling with her cousin. Then another group shows up and we all start chatting. Somehow she offers to give one of the guys there a ride home as we're leaving to go do whatever was next. She pulls him into the back seat and her cousin sits next to her for some reason. The sun has gone down and this guy only lives 5 minutes away. We're driving for like a minute when my buddy leans over and whispers, "Dude, she's blowing that guy." I look back as a streetlight lights them up. Oh yes, she is. To be clear, we are all in the same car. Now we drop off BJ guy who is like, "Thanks guys." And this is where the night gets worse. My buddy says, "I need you to just come with us to eat." I'm sorry but I'll pay. He's super intense about it, but also I'm starting to laugh about this blatant sluttiness and his date just looks so embarrassed. So I grudgingly say fine. We're driving like 5 minutes again and this girl is still trying to talk to me from the back seat. Then she leans forward and starts to kiss my neck. I pull away and tell her to stop. This happened maybe 10 more times and her cousin is restraining her and is mortified. I'm leaning forward in my seat to get away from crazy. Okay, she is too crazy for a restaurant, so my buddy decides to do a nearby local cheesesteak place that is pretty popular. We get inside and my friend starts laughing at me. He tells me to check my neck in the mirror. Yes, I somehow have a crazy ass hickey. I don't even have time to lose my crap on this girl when she hops over the counter and starts yelling an order into the microphone at the register. "We'll have fries." We dragged her back out to the car and sat her in the back seat. I stood guard from outside the car, so she couldn't blow any passerby or anything, while my friend had a dinner date. The whole time the crazy girl was begging me to please F her and trying to climb out. I thought less of her cousin for leaving her, but she said she needed to wait for her to sober up or whatever before they could go home. That took about 2 more hours of annoying. I actually saw her the next day and she couldn't look anyone in the eyes or talk to us. There was no second date for anyone. TLDR. Girl had 1 beer and went crazy. Blew another guy on my date. Try not to suck any dong on your way to the parking lot. I remember a hot little gal in college who agreed to go out with me. She said she had a surprise for me. Christian revival meeting. I was on the bus once watching a conversation like this take place and it ended with, dude who was unlikely to get laid, yeah alright. Who else is going? Hot Christian girl. Well, Jesus will be there. Met a girl on a Cupid. I take her out to dinner. She seems a little odd but overall nice and the conversation is going well. We both like video games, so I invite her over to my place after dinner for some Xbox action. She proceeds to drink all my liquor and take all my leftover hydrocodone from a work injury I had suffered a few months prior. She starts unplugging all my crap and calling me names like Brian and Todd and saying how she doesn't like it when people hit her. I tell her I'm taking her home and have to physically drag her to my car with her kicking and screaming the whole way there. She then tried to get out of my car while we are on the highway, but thankfully I had the sense to lock the doors and she was too fricked up to realize it. She gets pee and starts hitting me while I'm driving on the highway. I finally get her home, get her through her front door and leave. On my way back to my car, her freaking iPhone hits me in the back of the head. I drive home bleeding from my head. She calls me the next day from a number I don't recognize asking how our date went and if I knew where her phone was. I laugh and hang up. You gotta be kidding. There's a whole movie in that paragraph. Setting. Blind date at a sushi restaurant. I was 24. He was 19. We already had nothing to talk about, so I told him this story. I had gone to the local game stop for the sole reason to talk to the guy behind the counter. I got in line, had some small talk, and as I was getting my receipt, I asked him, "Hey, are you seeing anyone?" His reply, "Me, I'm gay." I was mortified that my gaydar failed me, so I just gave him a high five and left. I was still shocked and cried in my car. About 5 minutes after I finished that story, I look over to the 8-person group beside us. I caught the eye of the very same gay guy I hit on at game stop. We waved to each other. He was with his boyfriend. Whoa. At least you know he was actually gay and not using that as an excuse to turn you down. A guy I was totally into moved pretty far away. We were interested in each other though, spoke a lot, and eventually he decided to visit me for a weekend. I imagined romantic things happening. He wanted to go wallpaper shopping, and so it was that our first date was in the home furnishings department of John Lewis. He got lots of very ugly samples. Then we went to Habitat where he looked at lamps and said the word "ah" very loudly. Within 5 years we were married. Met a guy from a dating site. Guy in the photo sort of looked like Kevin Smith. I get to the restaurant and order a drink. I told the waiter I was meeting a blind date, so make it strong one. Guy I meet looks like Mo from the Three Stooges but much thinner. Same haircut and all. He proceeded to tell me that he lost all of the weight due to medical issues. I did not press further because we were having dinner drinks. He worked at a gaming store, so he took off his overshirt and was wearing a severely stained white undershirt. We are talking yellow pits to the max here. While talking about art, I notice that he keeps scratching his upper arm under the shirt sleeve. He asks if I want to see his tattoo. I say okay, and when he lifts the sleeve there is a cross tattoo, but his arm is covered in acne, which is what he was scratching picking at. We are at a Tex-Mex place. I order another drink and he orders a meal. He tells the waiter several times that he doesn't want tomatoes. Meal comes, and while talking he is using one of his 2 long fingernails to scratch the inside of his nose. He proceeds to clean the underside of his nail on the stack of napkins in the center of the table, so his boogies are there for all to see. When I think I have enough liquid courage to run, the waiter comes by and date guy flips on him because he found a tomato in his conquiso dip. He proceeds to say very loudly, "I cannot have tomatoes, dude, because I have irritable bowel syndrome." I wanted to die. Everyone was staring at us. He excused himself to the bathroom shortly after, and the waiter came flying over and said, "Hey, if you need to split, don't worry, me and the girls will cover your drinks." I was so grateful, but I didn't want to be mean, so I waited. The waiter brings the check and Mo, after patting his pants several times, says, "Oh crap, I forgot my wallet. Let me borrow your cell and I will call my mom and tell her to grab it off my dresser and bring it." I don't think I ever paid a check fast enough in my life. After a day he emailed asking when we could go out again. I told him I couldn't, and I didn't feel like we clicked. He called me shallow. LOL. One of the people I dated took me to her parents' house for our first date, wherein I listened to her dad talk for an hour about this deer that he was so inept at killing it took 4 bullets to finally put down. It's times like those I wish I had a jetpack. I was on a date with a girl that revealed that she was a Satanist, and I'm pretty sure she had sacrificed a goat. What's the worst date you have ever been on Reddit? Had a first date where we went to a couple of parks. We were both poor college students. At the last park we are walking back from the trail and we see some cops walking towards us. They stop us and ask if I was the owner of a grey Pontiac, which I was, so they immediately separate us. I am understandably confused. The one cop, who looked very pissed off the whole time, looks at my date and says, "Mom, is there a problem here?" Seems someone had called the cops on us saying I was in the car beating her on the way to the park. Holy crap, my life flashed before me. I thought I was being set up. Thankfully it was not so, and she informed the cops that I had not hit her. The cop gave a quick speech about the importance of reporting domestic violence and shot me a look that said, "I better not ever see you in a dark alley," and left us. TLDR. First date. Got interrogated by the police about possibly abusing my date. I didn't. I had a date with a single girl named Diane. That's the story above. Things didn't work out with us, but she thought I was a nice guy, so she introduced me to her best friend Kim. Kim and I ended up dating for 2 years, then ended up getting married. Diane in the meantime meets Sean and marries him. Kim and Diane were still best friends. 10 years after Kim and I married, Kim had an affair with Sean, which was Diane's husband, Diane being the girl in the date. Mine was the date with this person who spent the entire day telling me, while we were in a crowded Mexican restaurant, first, how much he hated his wife but wouldn't divorce her because he hated her so much that he didn't want her to have anything he had, followed by the detailed story of her suicide. Yikes. I had a great date I met on Match.com and I was walking her home at the end of the night and suddenly she started to run away. I started to chase after her and asked her what happened and she just said, "Police. I have a warrant out for me." Well, when I found out she had a warrant I kept running, but a different direction than she went. I eventually got caught by the cops and I had to spend a good 20 minutes explaining to them the situation and how I was in no way involved in her crack dealing ring. Thug life for real. You should have given Trinity more of a chance. You never know. You could have been the one. I hate you. Out on a first date. We're talking about mutual friends, neighbors, family, etc. And lots of the names are familiar. Long story short, I discovered that she was my second cousin. Yay. Rural Kentucky. My first attempt at online dating led me to what was a strange courtship. When we finally met up one night, she told me she had fantasies about me violating her and doing on her chest. I hope she has found a life mate. That guy needs to be off the streets. Not my story, but my wife's. She was dating me at the time, and I'm Asian. Her aunt set her up on a date with a good southern white Baptist boy who was apparently a lot better than me. She goes because she didn't realize it was supposed to be a date. They went to a Halloween event at a theme park. When my wife arrived, she was shocked to find out that she was actually on a date but couldn't leave because he was her ride. Turns out the good ole boy was more of a man. And by a man, I mean 15 years her senior. She was around 19 at the time. He was also an ex-con and a coke dealer user. All this was better than me, of course. My wife spent the entire night not just being terrified of the haunted houses and actors in costume and makeup, but being even more afraid of the dude who wouldn't let go of her hand, even though she kept insisting she had a boyfriend. The night ends with the dude's parents picking them up. He wasn't allowed a driver's license because of something having to do with his drug probation, and him trying to make out with her in the car. My wife moved out of her aunt's house within days, moved to my city instead. We had been a couple of hours apart, and we've lived happily ever after. TLDR. Wife was set up on blind date with a former cokehead. Whoa, a happy ending. On date, sitting at bar, when my date informs me that she was a witch, and that she had made her last boyfriend love her by casting a spell on him. She was even nice enough to tell me how the spell works. She took a vial of her period blood and poured it into his wine, and tricked him into drinking it. Now he's mine forever, she told me. She went on to say that it turned out she didn't really love him, but because of her spell, he would love her forever. She claimed he was still desperately in love with her even though she had dumped him. She was a with and a bee. I hope you didn't drink any wine that night. This weekend actually, got invited to a party as a second date. Girl met me at the door and walked me to where the band was playing. She then walked away with some guy. I didn't see her for a good hour before I decided to leave. Turns out he had some coke and she fricked him to score some. Guess he did me a favor. I hard time words use. You never told us who Midor is. 2 years into college I ran into a former high school acquaintance, Charlie, whose dad was my 6th grade world history teacher. I was single at the time and always thought that Charlie was a nice guy, so I was happy to give him my phone number, and pleased when I got a call back from him later that week. Charlie called to ask if I'd like to join him for a night at a comedy club with some of his friends. Sounded great to me. I didn't know him well enough to feel excited about a one-on-one date. So I show up to the comedy club. My sister dropped me off and was going to pick me up afterwards. We were sharing a car at the time, and walk in to meet his friends. Turns out his friends consisted of one of his classmates, and his aunt, uncle, mom and dad. I am awkwardly shocked but play it cool, and say hi to my old 6th grade teacher. Then his mom informed me that they had heard so much about me even though I'd only run into Charlie a few days ago. Then she informed me that it was actually Charlie's birthday. Mother of God. Somewhere in the back of my head, I was hearing a little voice urging me to abort mission. Then the routine started. Some puppeteer comic musician. It was not music, and it was definitely not comical, but there were a lot of puppets. One of them was Whitney Houston's face, bashing into a pile of chalk dust as I Will Always Love You played faster and faster. Somehow this turned into a lot of very graphic jokes about black guy dongs. None of Charlie's family was laughing, but he was totally losing it, and doing that thing where you look at the people there with you to see if they are sharing in this awesome laugh opportunity. I pretended to have diarrhea, went into the bathroom, and asked the first woman to enter the bathroom if I could use her cell phone to get my sister to come back. I came back to the table, very chagrined, telling him that I was not well at all and had to leave. TLDR. Friendly date was actually a birthday party with my history teacher and black dong jokes and puppets. I once went on a date with a Jehovah's Witness drug dealer. In my defense, I didn't know she was a Jehovah's Witness at the time, and to be fair, I didn't know she was a drug dealer either. Next time I see those guys, I'll ask them if they sell drugs. If it was a satanic sacrifice, I would have not eaten it. I have Hispanics in my neighborhood that raise goats for meat. Goats, are pretty cheap and eat almost anything. Yeah, a lot of cultures eat goat. So this is kind of the opposite. So I was on a date with a girlfriend a few years ago. I'm by a wide margin not the smoothest guy, and generally I am terrible at talking to women, but that has worked to my benefit because I have learned a great deal from repeated failures. So my girl and I are sitting in Olive Garden, and we were pretty much at that stage of dating where you can completely relax and just be yourself. I look over and see these two kids. They couldn't be older than 15, on what is clearly their first date ever. The dude was wearing an obviously iron dress shirt and tie, and the girl is comparably dressed. I'm watching these two for probably a half an hour, and the guy is sweating bullets and the girl is so nervous her hands are trembling. It really was adorable. At one point neither of them spoke for 15 minutes and they just kept looking around the restaurant without making eye contact with one another. So the girl gets up to use the restroom and I jump at the chance. I wait until she is clearly out of sight and walk over and sit in her seat. The kid looks terrified. I'm a nice guy, but I'm 6 feet 2 inches with a shaved head, beard and muscular build, so this happens. I look the kid straight in the eye. First date, the kid nods yes. Dude, listen, I've been where you are and you are failing at this. She likes you or she wouldn't be here with you, and she is as nervous as you are. If you chill out and relax, so will she. Take a second breath, and when she comes back talk to her about stuff she likes and you'll be golden. I stand up and walk back over to my table. The girl comes back and sits down and it was like a light bulb had lit up above the kid's face. He was super smooth and chill the whole rest of the evening, at one point both of them laughing so hard the girl had to wipe tears from her eyes. I once had fricked a VHS of toy soldiers. Lost my virginity to the Winter Olympics. That theme music. 5:30. We meet at 50's diner next to my work. 5:35. She orders a milkshake. 5:37. She asks me about Jesus in my life. 5:39. Maybe you need to read the fricking Bible. 5:42. If Gandhi did not accept the Lord Jesus Christ as our one and only savior, then he is burning in heck. And so will you. But the Lord can still save you. 5:44. I put $10 on the table and simply walked out of the door. What? Are you just going to leave me here? Good thing you found out right away and didn't waste more time. I signed up for internet access way back in 1995 when I was going to college and asked some guy to install a way to chat and meet people in the area on my computer. I was newish to computers at the time. He installed an iClient and I found a girl who sounded great. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'6" and goes to the school I went to, even the coffee shop I stop at on my way to classes. We chatted for a few days until we decided to finally meet. Fast forward a couple of days. Met her at 11 at the coffee shop and she had fangs. Literally, her canine teeth had implants and were filed down as fangs. She said she was a vampire and she thought we spoke about that during one of our conversations. Number. No we didn't. No joke. I logged off of Ike, disconnected my internet service and didn't sign up again for another 3 years. 3 years without internet. What? Stop fricking. It's time for dinner. I think I will announce all dinners like this. And end the meal with, stop dining. It's time to frick. My bad dates are quite legendary among my friends. Here's a little taste. I went out with this one guy and it seemed to be going alright. Nothing really screamed crazy. We went bowling first. SHHH. I love it, then went out for dinner. During dinner he starts talking about his sister's stag and doe that had been the weekend before. But it was a pig roast. Long story short, the guy who was supposed to cook the pig couldn't. So this guy stepped in to help his sister out. After the pig roast him and some friends went back to clean up, which meant getting rid of the pig. He then began describing to me in vivid detail how they had ripped the pig's carcass apart, pulled its spine out, ripped its face off and wore it like a mask. I'm sitting there absolutely horrified. I'm a huge animal lover. I repeatedly told him to stop, but he was laughing and thought I was joking. He then pulled out his phone and wanted to show me pictures. I actually had to raise my voice for him to realize I seriously didn't want to see pictures of him and his friends wearing a dead pig's face like a mask over dinner. We did not go out a second time. Then there was the vehicular manslaughter guy. Go on. I went out with a guy who, while we were walking downtown, would stop at every building and give me the historical background of each building in a different accent. Then when it came time to cross the street, he did some ballet leaps all the way across. He also asked me about all of my classes in detail, when I had never told him which classes I was taking. Sounds like Ted from Him. My first date ever. I went for a blind date downtown. At the time I lived in the suburbs, so it was an hour by public transit. We met up at a Thai restaurant and ended up ordering the same dish. The food was spicy and all the heat came from one pepper per dish. We dared each other to eat our pepper. He spat it out. I didn't. I took 3 trips to the washroom within the next hour and drank a lot of milk, provided by the restaurant as a courtesy. The conversation was terse. I felt awkward. Is this how a date is supposed to go? We left and, since neither of us were familiar with the area, we went to some nearby department store to window shop. We ended up in separate parts of the store, mostly because we didn't have much in common. I'm thinking about how much longer this date is going to last when I feel a rumbling in my bowels. I knew at that point that I had to crap immediately. It wasn't something that was going to be negotiated. I make a mad dash to the nearest store employee, who informs me there isn't a washroom in the store. The guy is nowhere in sight, so I run off to a place next door where they reluctantly let me use their basement toilet. Too late. I crap my pants on the way down. I spend the next hour cleaning up in the washroom with an ungodly amount of toilet paper. There's no cell service, so I can't call the guy with some quick excuse. By the time I get out, he's long gone. Not that I really wanted to see him at that point. I was supposed to see a friend around that time, but he assumed I ditched. That's not too bad. The worst part was that I had to take the subway back, an hour commute, with a mess hidden in my pants and, oh god, I'm sure people knew. TLDR, I crap my pants. My date told me her plan to poison her boss. I heard her out part expecting a just kidding at the end of her twisted story. There was no just kidding. Met up with a girl from a Cupid, then in approximately this order, discovered she was 1. Larger than she appeared in her pictures. 2. Polyamorous. This one ain't so bad I suppose, but in the context of the others. 4. A foot fetish dominatrix on Craigslist who also responds to missed connections posts just to troll people. 5. Homeless. I ended up buying her some cheap Chinese grub and dropping her off at her friend's house to stay at, and on the way there we almost managed to bond over video games and mind-altering substances. Almost. So the average OkCupid encounter then. Okay, here's the short version of my worst date. Met a girl on a dating site. Seems to be how most of these stories start. On our first date she invited me to her house. The house was pretty disgusting, dirty and plenty of trash around. She was remodeling her kitchen, so I gave her a pass on it. Next get together was at my house. I think it was our third date, but maybe second. Anyway, short story shorter, we get intimate and I quickly became aware she had not bathed. She was funky, not like sticky sweet, feminine funky, but like BO funky. Also the garden was completely unkempt. Now, I'm a child of the 80s, so a little garden is fine by me, but seriously, shave your stomach and inner thigh for Pete's sake. The next day I get a frantic phone call. I have bugs, she said. Bugs? I replied. What kind of bugs? Lice? She replied. Lice? Like upstairs or downstairs? I asked. Up, she said. I'm outside your house right now and I brought supplies. So, she comes in with red trash bags, cleaning supplies and 4 new pillows. She proceeded to bag everything she thought she came in contact with, throws out my pillows and leaves me with a bottle of red. Fortunately, I never got lice. I still keep the red under my sink as a reminder to be more careful in the future. I never saw or heard from her again and that was fine by me. TL. Dr. Lice. Freaking lice. As weird and gross as that is, at least she was polite or sane enough to come back and clean your crap. That counts for something. Girl broke down and started crying in the restaurant because the abortion she secretly got when she was younger was something she always regretted. All I asked her was how her day was going. My worst date was with a girl who thought that Islam was a country that she wanted to go to. Her head was so full of there that when we left the restaurant and she invited me back to hers, I started to make excuses why I couldn't stay. She was so persistent that in the end I lied that I was a Christian and basically said that I thought that it'd be inappropriate to go back to hers. TLDR went on date with stupid girl and said I was a Christian to avoid freaking. That's bad. Until I got married, crazy was semi-regular for me. My favorite is the month-long romance with a girl that wasn't even real. I'll back up. I just finished dating the craziest of the crazy. We'd had quite a few incidents together and it ended with me calling her dad, who called her and threatened to report her car stolen if she didn't come home and quit stalking me around town. And that's not even the half of it. So a month or so later I get a flower and a note on my car from a secret admirer saying she's been watching me for some time but is too shy to meet me. I know it's her. It has to be. So I pass it off. She leaves another note with an email address and I send her an email telling her I know who she is and to leave me alone. She insists she isn't my ex and we go back and forth a few times about it. I caught her defending my ex a few times, which was the clearest giveaway. A few weeks go by of me continuing to try and ignore the situation, and finally she says she wants to call me to prove she isn't my ex, even though she's already claimed to know her at this point. I say what the heck, and give her my cell number. My ex already had it, so what's the harm? Sure enough, later that night I get a call from a number I don't recognize and answer, even though I'm pretty sick of dealing with her crap at this point. Lo and behold, there's a girl with a voice I don't recognize claiming to be this admirer on the other end. At first I had a hard time believing it, but I know my ex's voice and this definitely wasn't her. The girl took ownership for all the things that happened and even answered a few suspicious questions about her alleged events. She finally says she has to go because she's at work and hangs up. I'm shocked. I'd never had anyone do anything like that for me before, and I'm a romantic deep down, so at this point I'm pretty entangled. Finally she says she wants to meet and I eagerly, with heart on sleeve, agree. We go to a bar I usually frequent and I grab a stool at the bar and order a drink. Finally the bartender walks over and sets down a beer in front of me, saying a young lady bought it for me. I ask him to point her out and follow his index finger across the bar to a table. Sure enough, there at the table sat my ex. I told him to dump the drink down the sink and stormed over to her, as angry with her as I was at myself for being so stupid. The only thing that didn't make sense was the phone call, so I demanded she explain. She finally gave in and told me she put her roommate up to it, which was pretty crushing. I couldn't believe another human being would let her brief her on everything that had been going on and pretend to be this girl just to screw with me. After that I left and told her if she ever talked to me again I'd get a restraining order. 2 years back I left work for the day to find a note on my car with a phone number and some flirty words. Called the number just out of curiosity. When the girl on the other end heard me, she said she must have put the note on the wrong car. Wasn't a date. Can just relate slightly. My dad's story. He had been set up on a blind date by his friend. As he picked up his date, he noticed she was carrying a strange bag. Not a purse or anything normally brought on a date, but a garbage bag with stuff in it. He kinda shrugged it off and they got in the car and started driving. During the car ride though, he began to notice what was contained within those bags. 2 baby dolls with blood smeared on them. He asked her why she had brought 2 dolls, and she just nonchalantly responded, "They're my children." My dad instantly felt that this girl had some problem with her, so he stopped at a gas station and asked her to go inside to get him cigarettes. He immediately drove off, abandoning her at the station with her 2 bloody dolls. When he talked again with his friend who had set up the date, his friend was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. She had 2 abortions in the past 2 years, so now she carries around those dolls and claims they're her children. I thought it was no big deal. TLDR. My dad went on a date and proceeded to ditch some crazy bee who carried 2 dolls around which symbolized her 2 aborted fetuses. A number of years ago, I met this German girl at the bar I bounced at. She was kinda cute, hella smart, and knew more about music than almost anyone I've ever met. But she says that we should hang out sometime, so I mention this jazz bar that has an amazing open mic night on my night off. She says yes, and we make plans. We meet at the appropriate time at another open mic night at another place, but she barely talks to me the entire time. Neither of us drive, so we jump a bus to a nearby restaurant to eat. Then she mentions a piano bar, so we jump a cab over there. All this time, she is talking about her roommate and how she is worried that he doesn't have health insurance. That's just a little strange until she talks about how she was discussing that situation with his mother. Warning bell kicks on hardcore. Turns out that her roommate is actually her fiancé and she believes that she is pregnant by him. She hadn't been to the doctor, but a woman knows these things. So we get to the jazz bar and I get drunk off my butt because I know this isn't going anywhere. The music, as always, is great, but since we're both busing, we have a different problem. The buses have stopped running, so she ends up calling her fiancé to pick us up. As fate would have it, I have a good friend who lives pretty close to them, so I get to ride back to their place and then I walk over to my friends and sleep it off until the buses are running again. TLDR. Dinner, $20. Drinks, $20. Cabs, $15. Finding out your date is engaged and pregnant, priceless. I was on a second date with a guy I met on the internet. Boring guy, fast car. He decides to evade the police while driving 120 miles per hour on the highway, takes an exit, and I end up in an upside down 350Z, which had rolled over at 90 miles per hour into a stone wall and a telephone pole. Over a year of physical therapy, minor nerve damage, will never internet date again. First day of the school year, I was on my way to class when this guy stopped to ask me for directions to a coffee shop on campus. I gave them to him, and before I could leave, he asked for my number and if he could take me out for coffee sometime. I said yeah, sure, he's kinda cute, maybe it would work out. No, it didn't. Next day we agreed to meet up in the same spot where we met. He was half an hour late, didn't apologize for it or give any particular reason why he was late, and suggested we go for a walk. I was like 8, whatever, so we walked along and got to know each other. First thing I found out is that he's 24, I'm 18, so I was understandably a bit skeeved out. He singled me out for directions because you have a really nice figure, but mostly up top. The terrible thing about this date was that the entire time we were talking he would put in super subtle comments like, oh look, all the couples around us are going at it, I think it's a sign. Can I touch your boobs? I've never seen ones that big before. Are you usually a fan of bold guys? What's your normal type? How many guys have you fricked? Do you like direct approaches? I think we should go to your place and watch a movie. He lived with his parents apparently. It was awkward and creepy, and when I said that I wasn't into that on the first date, and especially with him, he got all offended and called me a prude, stuck up, and other derogatory things. It felt like the more uncomfortable I was, the more he enjoyed talking. Whenever I refused to answer a question he would ask me, either because it was way too personal for a first date or it was something just plain rude. He would go off on a tangent about his adult experience while gently caressing my shoulder. We ended up sitting on a park bench together, which was great because I could stare straight ahead of me as I fielded off his advances instead of having to look him in the eyes. TBH, I think I mostly stuck it out because I knew it would be a funny story to tell afterwards. But I hit boiling point when he interrupted me in the middle of a conversation to say, did you know that you have a small lisp when you talk? I politely excused myself and power walked my butt out of there. Also afterwards he texted me a novel saying that he was sorry if he offended me, but we're just looking for different things. And then he sent another text clarifying that he meant he was sorry for me, because I'd be missing out. There's more inappropriate crap he said did during the date, but typing it out would legit make me go over the character limit. I don't know how old you are now compared to your story, but there are a lot of guys out there like that. Sorry. Props to you for getting away from that one. Best of luck in the future too. : I got tricked into one date. Not entirely true, of course, as you said you'd be open to anyone who wanted to meet up with you. True. Fixed. I once talked to a girl online for some time. She was really smart, quirky, funny and pretty cute. I enjoyed the conversation and thought I was in for a treat. When I saw her for the first time I learned she had no arms, and that was a bit of a surprise. I didn't know how to react. I went on a date once with a guy who intended to study mortuary science. He asked me how I'd feel about taking a cold bath before fricking, and then staying very still throughout. I couldn't get out of that car fast enough. Goat is a very common meat, bruh. It's the only meat that isn't ostracized by any one specific religion. But the dad did know you were coming. That's why the little brother was there. He was pretty sketched that his daughter was meeting some stranger from online and decided that if anything happened, the little brother could pedal fast back home in time for daddy to grab the gun. Hence why he was in the door. Ostracized is not a word, but it does sound like what happens when you join a neo-Nazi group. Ostracized. I met a girl when I was in college. I really only knew her name and had said hi to her a few times, so I never technically met her. Anyway, a little while after we both graduated, she added me on the MySpace. She had a bunch of pics of her posing in lingerie and bathing suits, and she was pretty good looking. A black girl, which I was kind of into at the time. So through some messages on MySpace, we exchanged numbers and agreed to hang out. This girl is originally from Hawaii and is moving back in a few weeks. I know now that she just wants to bang. Otherwise, why hang out with me? So I invite her to my house and she agrees. She has no car, so I pick her up and we get to talking on the ride back. She proceeds to tell me how I couldn't come to her house because the last time she had a guy there, her grandmother caught her date fricking her from behind and made the guy feel uncomfortable. So we get to my house, order a pizza and put a movie in. We kissed a little, and she stops and asks me what the name of the town was I lived in. I told her and she said, oh yeah, I've been out here before. I went on a date with a guy who fricked me bent over his couch and recorded it. It might be on the internet. Ugh. She then proceeds to tell me how she has 2 daughters sisters in Hawaii because her father debauched her and she birthed 2 girls from him. She said everyone thinks they are her sisters because she was only about 13 when this started happening. She told me a bunch of other stories like how she had a guy CM all over her butthole and then shove his dong in and use the CM as lubricant. Then while I was taking her home, obviously I backed out of freaking her. She kept telling me how wet her pee was and that she was probably going to leave a stain on the seat. I have never been more scared for my dong in my entire life. Frick that. Good application of the old adage. Don't stick your dong in crazy. I invited a nice looking boy to my house to meet my parents. I was pretty serious. He was a very nice guy as he was really nice to my soft in the head younger brother. People usually don't even give him the time of day, but I knew this particular person was a nice person because he seemed particularly aware of my brother. I live in a remote part of the woods as my family is very poor and they are rather religious people, trading commodity for scenery. So I brought him up to my room thinking we would probably get it on, but he was rather shy and kept looking at all the walls in my room, which was odd since there really wasn't anything in them. My mother invited him to dinner but he declined. Even though we brought out our best goat, he seemed reluctant to partake. Anyway, what was really awkward was when we dropped him off to the bus stop and he kept giving me glances, so I knew he was into me, but once on the bus he said, "You will never see me again." I found that to be very awkward, as I have been remotely watching over him by ritual and still do in fact, from time to time. TL. Doctor invited a stranger to my home, invited him to dinner, expected to get laid, but he left on a sour note without any explanation. I can't believe it took me until the goat to realize what this was. A couple years ago I met a guy on my senior class boat cruise. It's like a semi-formal prom on a boat. He was from another school as our senior class was sharing the boat with a few other local schools. He was nice, smart, tall, and generally attractive. We talked for a while and then exchanged numbers. In a couple weeks, we agreed to meet up. I had to drive 45 minutes to his house because his parents wouldn't let him drive a car. When I arrived, he had shaved his head and was much thinner than I remembered. I'm not fat, but I prefer my men bigger than me, and this kid was really scrawny. After several awkward hours watching movies, I asked if he wanted to get something to eat. The only place he wanted to go was McDonald's. When we got there, he had forgotten his wallet and I had to pay. We ate in awkward silence and then I drove us back to his house. When we got there, I figured he could redeem himself by being talented in bed. I made the first move and leaned in to kiss him, and within less than a minute of making out he had managed to take off every item of clothing he had on, even his socks. Meanwhile, I am still fully dressed and really creeped out. I grabbed my phone and pretended to read a text from a friend who needed my help, and I immediately left. He never paid me back for the McDonald's. TL. DR, I had to drive an awkward kid to and pay for McDonald's. Worst date I've ever been on. Probably would have been some wild freaking first date I'd ever been on. I wasn't the most talkative guy in school, but I rather fancied her, so I worked up the courage to ask one day, and to my surprise, she said yes. We were both 15-16 at the time. I get a ride to her place from my mom. We pick her up and head over to this restaurant in one of the classier parts of town. Get dropped, head in, make light conversation, and I find out she's never been there before. I'd only been there once myself for my birthday a year or two ago. She asks me to order for her and I do so. 2 steaks with the trimmings. Anyway, things continue rather pleasantly and our food arrives. We dig in and continue to talk, but I notice about 15 minutes and that she's gone a little cold on me and she hasn't yet touched her steak. She's picking off the veg and potatoes around the side, but the steak isn't touched. Natural reaction is that I didn't ask if she had any dietary restrictions, so I apologize immediately and ask if she doesn't eat meat. She says she does, but wait for it, I'm waiting for you to cut up my food for me. Apparently at the age of 15-16, she'd never once had to eat a slab of meat that wasn't first cut up for her by either her parents or whomever else she was dating at the time. I was surprised, but I taught her how to cut up her own food. Seriously, girl didn't seem like she'd ever held a knife before, and we drop her off at her place in silence. So, thus ended my first date, ever, and last date, with her. Sigh. A guy asked me to go to a concert with him. When I got to the venue, he also brought his girlfriend with him. I never replied to his messages ever since. Homecoming formal my junior year. My first dance ever. My date picks me up 30 minutes late. Realizes he isn't wearing a tie or appropriate shoes. Stops at the store. Steals a tie and some shoes. Because apparently he really felt like he was fricking the man. Forgets that he never made dinner reservations. We end up eating a $50 meal. He got steak. I got a salad. Forgets his credit card. I end up having to pay. Did I mention he say in front of me in 2 classes? I got set up on a blind date to a homecoming event dance in college. She was pretty cute and I was looking forward to a fun night. To give you a better understanding of the situation, I went to a religious college that is owned by a church, so all school-sponsored events are kept pretty clean, including music played at events. Not 5 minutes after we had got there, she starts complaining about how inappropriate the music they were playing was. It was just some pop song that was popular at the time. From there it just went downhill. From the music they were playing at the event, to how all media today is filth, how her roommates were horrible people, etc. All within about the first hour of the date. Thankfully, sadly, I had experience in handling crazy and skillfully cut down the length of the date drastically. Kind of easy when she thinks everything is evil. Next semester I meet a new friend and find out she was one of the girls' roommates and moved out. Crazy girl would yell at them constantly for watching TV because everything on it was evil and made her feel bad. On several occasions she had turned it off while they were watching it because she didn't approve of what was on. She went on to meet a guy online, fly out to visit him after a week, get engaged, and marry him a month later. The Satanic Bible staunchly prohibits harming animals except for food or if you are attacked. She could have been a Luciferian. Satanists, as in Levian Satanists, don't really worship Satan, they worship their own potential. Luciferians literally worship the devil. After dating a girl for about a month, she let me know that she had spent time in a mental institute 2 different times for trying to kill herself. She did not do it because she was depressed or something like that. She did it so she could enter the land of the dragons. As if that was not bad enough, she said that she still wanted to get there someday. Long story short, his dog peed on me. He sat across the room when watching our sip even though I was on a huge couch all by my vivacious self. He took me into his room and just when I thought it was going to get hot, he showed me hours of all the death metal he'd composed in Finale, and then he showed me the organ he had made, and played like 25+ minutes of organ for me on his homemade organ. And then right before I left he told me he wasn't physically attracted to me and that his dog humped me. Hey, I eat goat, and it's delicious, but I'm not a Satanist in the slightest, just Greek. What is your Tinder horror story? My roommate loves Tinder, and she's brought back numerous visitors, which is fine, except for the fact that the apartment is tiny and we share a room, and also the fact that my roommate doesn't really care what I end up seeing, and, as it turns out, most guys don't care about having another girl in the room either. Some take it as an opportunity to ask me to join. My roommate is my Tinder nightmare. Finally, started seeing a girl off Tinder. It was going well for about 2 weeks and thought she was pretty cool. Then things started getting weird. She used to always joke about killing me. I thought it was okay the first few times but then it got annoying. I told her to stop and she kept doing it. IDK if it was because she thought it was funny that it freaked me out or what. Anyways, told me she has a shotgun in her room. Yikes. Long story short, I told her I didn't want to see her anymore. She didn't like that. For the next 3 weeks she's absolutely hounding me. Calls me constantly. Shows up at my work asking for me. Keeps coming over to my apartment. She actually knocked on my door for 30 minutes. When I didn't answer she went around back and started knocking on my bedroom window. Got really concerned for a while but eventually she gave up. I went on a date with a guy and the entire time he was talking about how men are superior and how there have been scientific studies to show that women have an emotional reaction to the color red when they see it. I wonder why he was single. I'm probably too late but here it goes. Sorry for the wall of text. My first and only Tinder date, I started talking to a cute guy. We hit it off really well. We'll call him Greg. Greg lived in a town nearly an hour away, so we texted for about 2 weeks before we decided to meet due to schedules. During this time, Greg consistently attempted to wow with his food knowledge. I work in the fine dining restaurant industry, often telling me about what meal he was cooking for him and his roommates each night. After several days of talking, he then asks me to come to his house so he will be able to cook for me. I oblige, figuring what's the worst that could happen. I've talked to him several times and felt okay about the whole situation. The day comes and we meet somewhere neutral and I follow him to his house, all the while him explaining how excited he is to cook for me. We arrive at his place, everything is going really great. He's exactly as I pictured him and his personality fits me perfect. Dinner time rolls around and he tells me he needs to go downstairs to begin prep. I become eager and say I'd love to help. He insists I stay on the couch and relax. We continue to talk across rooms and I can't see what's going on in the kitchen. He puts something in the oven and says it will be ready in just a bit and that he made extra in case I was hungry. 15 minutes late, Greg leaps off the couch to a timer and runs to the kitchen. He brings sauces first, saying that they are the best part. He lays ketchup, ranch and barbecue sauce on the table. I begin to get confused, wondering what he made, as he refused to tell me, announcing that he wanted to keep it a secret. Greg returns to the kitchen to retrieve the plates. He walks in and carries a turkey platter to the table. I gaze into what had to be no less than 3 bags of frozen fries he had displayed on a turkey platter for our dinner. He looks at me eagerly, awaiting my reaction for me to lose it. I begin uncontrollably laughing and his smile drops as I say, "This is great, thank you," assuming this was a gag meal and he had prepared dinner to follow. No, Greg invited me to dinner to cook me his specialty, frozen French fries. They were delicious fries, and the sauce was the best part. Met up with a really hot but curious girl. I'm a lesbian. This girl had only ever been with men and wanted to experiment with girls. She was stupidly hot, like hot. We matched and we chatted for like 2 days. I soon found out we had no common ground at all. Like, none. However, she wanted to meet, and me being the frisky les gremlin I am, agreed just because she was hot and I could take her girl on girl virginity. We agreed to meet one day, picked her up and we went for drinks. Walked back to mine and chatted a little more over alcoholic root beer and Breaking Bad. We started making out. She took off my bra. I took off hers. She took my pants off. I took hers off. We started kissing, touching, feeling. She starts fingering me. I can tell straight away she is a first timer. She starts jabbing at my poor vag with her 1/2-inch acrylics. I tell her to slow down a little and be a little more gentle about it. All of a sudden, she bursts into tears and says she's not ready. I tell her it's fine, blah blah. She ends up staying at my place and we cuddle for the night until I sobered up enough to drive her back home in the morning. Later the next day I go for a pee and realize it stings like a bee and my pee smells dreadful and is cloudy. Run to the doctors because I'm a casual hypochondriac and take a pee sample. Doctor sticks the paper in my pee and yup, straight away it shows I have a UT. I didn't pee after little Miss Precarious scratched my insides out. B gave me a UT and blue balls. Blue balls. Blue walls. I dated someone I met from Tinder for a month. Seemed good on paper. Master's student. Yoga teacher. Cultured. etc. Found out she was doing H and didn't consider that a big problem. I actually had to explain to her the definition of a high-functioning addict because she felt that having a job and going to school meant the H thing wasn't a problem. We broke up and she went back to her junkie XBF. Bullet dodged. Edit. LOL, all the people PMing me trying to confirm if I was simultaneously dating their own crappy GF. If you find yourself wondering if I'm describing your GF, you should just break up with her immediately. My Tinder horror story is very funny looking back. The girl comes over. She couldn't get there until 7:30ish. I had some pizza warming in the oven just in case she was hungry. For some stupid reason, I put the pizza in the box to warm in the oven. It was a real pizza from a pizza place. She wasn't hungry, so we jump right into making out. Clothes get strewn. We head back towards the bedroom. I go into the kitchen and turn the oven off, but leave the pizza in there. A few minutes later, I am going down on her and I hear a beeping. I lift up my head and say, "What was that?" She says, "I think it was a truck backing up." I hop up just to check in the oven. Without my glasses on, I had accidentally missed off by 1/8 of an inch and my crappy oven went to broil. The beeping was telling me it was preheated. I stupidly opened the oven and smoke comes billowing out. Then the box bursts into flames. I am standing there butt naked and I start yelling frick oh crap. Then she comes running in totally naked as I pull the box out thinking I am going to pour water on it. It was stressful, I don't know what I was thinking. I set it on the stove and then she hits it with a dish towel. Sparks and burnt crap go all over my kitchen but the box is still on fire. My sink is so full of crap that I can't get the box in there. She yells bathtub so I pick up a goddamn burning box and run to my bathroom over the carpet, my shower mat and past the shower curtain. All very flammable. The entire top of the pizza box was either in flames or charred and flaking off as I ran. Remember, we are both totally naked this whole time. So imagine a naked, screaming man running through his crappy apartment with a burning pizza box in his hands. That was me. This was a date. I throw the box in the bathtub and turn the shower on. She was so super cool about it. She helped me clean everything up. And then we got dressed and just stood outside for a while. She could tell I was really freaked out and kept reassuring me all was well. Then we went back in and I went down on her again. Then we had sex. We still hang out often and have a lot of fun together. I still have burn marks in my bathtub and on my bathroom door. I stupidly opened the oven and smoke comes billowing out. Then the box bursts into flames. To extinguish an oven fire, just close the oven door and turn off the oven. The inside of the oven can easily handle any flames and the oven door staying closed deprives the fire of the oxygen that needs to keep burning. I had been on a couple of dates with this girl that I met on Tinder and learned that she was really into the rockabilly scene. I found out that a local nightclub was hosting a rockabilly themed night and so I took her. She had dressed to the nines and we were having a great time in the club. Suddenly this guy accidentally tipped a drink on her 50s style dress. The guy apologized profusely. She storms over to grab her coat and bag and on the way out she just punches the guy in the face. Everyone in the club was shocked. I took her outside and told her she couldn't react like that and that's when she took her heel off and hit me square in the face for siding with the guy. Blood everywhere. I never answered her calls after that. Oh, and she used to be a stripper and cam girl. This adds nothing to the story but I just like telling people. Pew pew. I met this guy on Tinder and we had a couple really fun dates. I was pretty into him. So on our third date, I decided I wanted to have sex with him. He took me out for a really nice date and then he invited me back to his place for a glass of wine. One thing led to another and we started making out on his couch, fully clothed. But this lasted forever. I was ready to go, if you know what I mean. I didn't want to make out the whole night. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and I took off all of my clothes. Then he sits up, still fully clothed, and looks at me and says, "I can't have sex with you. I have a STD." Possibly most awkward moment of my life. I tried to be super nice about it, but I promptly got dressed and left. And as many of my friends have pointed out, I am extremely grateful that he told me. That's really big of him. Nothing but props to that dude. En route to the worst date ever, this guy texted me from the burrito place we were meeting to tell me he'd already ordered me the salad. I repeat, salad at a burrito place. Also, was this the past? Was I now incapable of placing my own food order? Anyway, after arriving with my salad ready beside his plate of tacos, he spent the next half an hour telling me about his model ex-girlfriend and how passionate their breakup sex had been last weekend. The final straw was, even after telling him I wasn't a big fan of smoking, he literally asked a stranger for cigarettes and then chain smoked them beside me. Way late to the party apparently, but I feel obliged to share my best friend's story. He you philosophool, I think was his username, died recently at age 23 from a massive seizure in his sleep, but he loved to tell this story, so I'll tell it here. So at least if I ever forget it I know at least I can find it. So this philosophool is a shy guy, timid, a bit neurotic. Dates are hard to come by for him but when he's on them, he's nice and charming and fairly handsome. I'll give him that, so he doesn't do too bad once he's got a shot. Anyway, all us lads are on Tinder at this stage and we all have the philosophy always swipe, whichever way is Yes, so you get maximum matches and take it from there. Now there is this one girl who looks a bit rough, a bit unkept I'll say, and her description read, I love giving BJs. Now Philosopher was a very compassionate guy and talked to literally everyone he matched with and gave everyone at least one date. He didn't match with many, but bless him he dated them all, including his GF up until his death. May she never read this. Full stop. He travels on a train to date this girl at her house. He recounted that from being picked up at the train station the car was full of litter. The footwall was 90% litter, 10% his feet. And the woman from the photo, she had aged, not too kindly, either. And the house was run down, dirty, every room doubling as a bedroom for some cave dweller from that part of town. My memory gets a little hazy here, but she asks him if he'd like tea. He says he would and he has some chamomile. In his words, the one clean thing I had in this house was a teacup and a chamomile tea. After a while of small talk and awkward experience, she asked him if he wanted a blowjob, assuring him she was really good at these. He finds a spot on the bed among the rubbish, cup of chamomile in hand, his only refuge of cleanliness. As the constant background dripping is drowned out by excessive slurping off his half-mast, he cuddles his warm tea thinking only of home. Man, the way he described it was a very funny and less like he's repulsed. Oh crap, my time to shine. Now I swear all is true. This girl I've been sweet talking for a few weeks and I finally set up a date to meet up and go out to this nice restaurant and have dinner. The night comes and she asks me to pick her up because her car is in the shop. I head over to the address and it's this confusing apartment complex, but quickly find her outside her building. But she asked me to meet her family, so I go and meet her mother, who is the sweetest woman ever, and her father, who was quiet but kind. After we leave, she immediately turns to me and says, can we pick up my cousin? I'm shocked but say sure. I didn't really question it. We head to a really sketchy neighborhood in San Jose and pick up this super skinny tatted up white guy, and he asks who the frick I am, and I was about to say her date, but she cuts me off and says, oh, just a friend, don't worry about him, and he says, alright babe. He then guides me 2 cities over to this crappy house where this really nicely dressed Asian guy meets us outside and takes us into the garage where a cracked out skinny Mexican guy and pregnant white chicken sits us down in between. Then and asked our poison. My date said weed along with the Mexican guy and the cousin. The pregnant chick says I'm fine. Weed is bad for the baby, and then pulls out a crack pipe and starts smoking something. The Asian guy said pay up, and everyone looks towards me and I said alright and pulled $60 out of my wallet and asked if that's enough, and the Asian guy said it's fine. He leaves the garage taking my get the guest soda and comes back 10 awkward minutes later and stoned with nothing, saying sorry guys, I'm out of weed. But my dealer is on his way. 20 minutes later he shows up screaming and throwing weed at the Mexican guy and just leaving. Then the Asian guy asked if anyone had a pipe and I said I did, and they all got happy and I went outside to my car and drive off because I'm pretty sure I would have died that night. I had been talking to this girl on Tinder for a while and we decided we wanted to smash. The problem is I had asked my roommate if I could have the room later. Apparently, unlike the rest of the animals you people seem to have as roommates. So when I went to sign this girl in, we have a proctor in the lobby at my university's dorms. My roommate and several other friends of mine placed a Bluetooth speaker in my room and hid in the hallway, waiting for me to get back. I didn't see them and things started to get hot and heavy when Let's Get It On started playing from somewhere in the room. I started searching and after 5 minutes, while the song I just had sex was finishing playing, I found the Bluetooth speaker under my roommate's bed behind his dresser. Yes, I had to move both of them. I found the power button but not before the wonderful sound of hardcore pornography filled the room. The 2 of us decided to call it, so we threw on some clothes. I walked her past all 6 of the bastards. I never saw her again. Unlike the rest of the animals you people seem to have as roommates. My roommate and several other friends of mine placed a Bluetooth speaker in my room and hid in the hallway. Met this girl on Tinder. Invited her into bed. She accepts. Comes over. We have fantastic sex. A lot. Same thing the next night. Thing is, she's moving to Montana in a few weeks for a job. A cook position in a national park. She invites me out there. I look into the job and eventually get it. We decide to start dating. Met twice. Known her for a month. I'm an idiot. To keep it exclusive at adult summer camp there in Montana. I get out there. She freaks out and breaks up with me because she has cancer. Cancels the breakup. Does it again the next night. I agree and say it's over. Proceeds to dong block me constantly throughout the summer and we scream at each other in the kitchen. Poor choices all around. As a man in a long-term pre-Tinder relationship, I'm really living vicariously through these stories and they are outstanding. Bless you people. This didn't actually come about through Tinder, but rather through an equivalent app. So, I meet the guy there and he's just incredible. Clever, good looking, funny, you get the type. The only catch is that he doesn't live in my city. After a couple of weeks of messaging and phone calls, we decide to meet up and we settle on that I would be going to him because I'd never been to his city and that seemed like a fun little adventure. Right? Wrong? The big day comes and I embark on the 2.5-hour train journey and I get all excited and I can't wait to get off the train. And then he's not at the platform when I get off. Try to call him to no avail and after 4 hours of waiting, I decide to take the next train back home. Haven't heard from him since. TLDR. Met a guy from a different city relatively far away. Stands me up when I go out there to meet him. I don't really have a horror story, since I've gotten about one date out of Tinder which went alright. But I've been rejected plenty, the highlight of which was this girl, who seemed pretty interesting and was reasonably attractive. So I swiped right, and it turned out that we matched. Hooray. So, I sent her a message. Something clever, along the lines of hey, a match. Did we just become best friends though? I can't take credit for that one. I did steal that from Reddit stepbrothers. Happily, she responded rather promptly, so I was eager to read what she'd sent. Cause for the most part women just kinda ignore me. Anyway, I open it up and all it said was I swiped the wrong way. That woman is a savage. Matched with a girl, and she was quite pretty in the face. All of her pictures were mostly of just her face upper body, but I didn't pay any mind. She initiated the conversation, and she was immediately into hooking up, so of course I invited her over. She gets there and I answer the door, and turns out she was about 6 feet 5 inches. I am 5 feet 8 inches on a good day. I let out an audible holy crap and she picked me up and carried me to the bedroom like a baby. No regrets. Advice welcome. So I went on 3 dates with this dude and we hooked up the last time at his house. Things end with the typical fade away. I was fine with it. We weren't very compatible and I noticed a few minor red flags. 6 months later he starts emailing me, obviously looking for a reenactment of our summer fling. When I turn down his advances, he sends me a screenshot of myself in his bedroom while we were hooking up. Half a year ago. So obviously this douche nozzle filmed us without my consent. I reported it to the police and now, almost a year after I filed the report, I have to testify against the creep. I have no legal rep except the state's victim advocate who only seems to have experience with DV cases. Has anyone else been through something like this? I can't find a way to report him via Tinder. I deleted my account a long time ago. My biggest concern is that he's still out there being a creep to other ladies on Tinder. Downloaded Tinder for quick and simple hookups. First couple matches were pretty decent. Drinks, sex, etc. The third girl however wanted to take things a little slower. First date, a little making out. Second date, same thing but still won't go home with me. Third date, we had some really awkward sex with the lights on and no music. I was so nervous. I had a hard time keeping it up and she was barely wet. We've been dating for 10 months and she is going to meet my parents this weekend. The horror. Happened a year ago. Met this guy. Similar interests. Looked great in his pictures. We decided to meet up on a Sunday for lunch. I was so hungover from a friend's Christmas party that I threw up upon arrival. He didn't seem to mind. He didn't order a drink and I couldn't order one due to the hangover. Once the hangover subsided, I suggested we walk around and head into a bar. He doesn't like the first bar, had a bad experience at the next bar, and keeps on passing on them. Until we finally get to his favorite bar. He orders drinks, and after a few more drinks I suggest heading to a wine bar. He passes, because he confesses that he's only 20, and while his profile said he worked at a local college, it was a work-study position, because he is a junior there. Maybe it was the hangover, maybe it was the exhaustion, but I still brought him home. Things occurred, and I found out he was a virgin. He ran away in tears and threw up on my apartment stairs. Repeated the process once he was 21, and it was almost the same situation. Never again. We talked for a couple of hours, drank some wine, watched a movie and we had sex. Then things went a little downhill. We laid in bed and suddenly it looked like she was about to black out, so I helped her sit right up and asked if I could help her, get her some water and stuff. But she didn't speak a word. She just sat there with her hands in her hair for a couple of minutes and then puked all over my sheets. At this point I wanted to get her to the shower ASAP, but she was just stunned or something. I didn't know what to do. After a couple minutes I finally convinced her to get up and brought her to the shower so she could clean herself while I could clean the sheets and all that. Every 5 minutes I checked on her if she was okay, but she would just sit on the floor with the shower running and wouldn't talk. It was all very awkward. After 20 minutes or so I brought her a towel and some clothes and we sat on the edge of my bed and she told me that she was born without a womb. She cried. I calmed her down and we finally went to sleep, without a blanket or sheets. I didn't have spare ones in my student apartment. The next day I made breakfast and she went home. Weirdest date I ever had. I matched this pretty cute looking girl. She didn't look like she was in super great shape, but she didn't look obese or anything. Well, we exchanged numbers and I called her. She agreed to come over to my house, so I waited outside while she found her way over. She pulls up in a super badass car, so I'm like, heck yeah. When she gets out, it looked like her suspension let out a sigh of relief. She was at least 300 pounds. Nice girl though. She gave me a back massage, then I told her I was tired afterwards and she left. I'm a little late to the party, but my first Tinder date has been my most eventful date ever. So I matched this absolutely drop dead gorgeous girl, way out of my league, and we arranged to meet in the city for a few drinks on a Friday evening. We meet in this little bar and share a drink. The conversation is a lot of small talk to begin with, but it's flowing well. Anyway, we're there for about 30 minutes when she says she hasn't eaten anything yet and asks if I wanna grab a bite to eat. I do. So we finish our drinks and start moving outside to find some food. As we're walking along the sidewalk I see this guy in front of me staring me down. Like he is proper shooting daggers at me and making me super uncomfortable. I try to ignore him. Look at the ground. Look at the girl. Whatever. We move to pass him and he spins around on his heel and slams me into a wall. He has his forearm pressed up against my neck and is pushing so hard my feet are starting to lift off the ground. I try and pull his arm away from my throat, unsuccessfully, and my vision is starting to go black. I thought I was done for here. In a last-ditch effort to not be strangled to death, I used the wall as a board to push my knee up into him as hard as I can. I hit him square in the groin and he relinquishes his grip. My vision starts to return, although it's giving me a splitting headache. I splutter and try and get my breath back a bit while I watch this guy curl over, red in the face with veins popping out of his forehead. He stumbles over to the street and throws up all through the gutter. I turn to the girl who's just watching all of this like a roue in headlights. Turns out, the guy was her ex-boyfriend who heard about our date through a mutual friend of theirs. I managed to wheeze out enough to ask her if she'd like to get another drink with me, as I could really use one. She declines and says she's just going to get a ride home, and practically sprints away from whatever the heck this situation was. I ended up leaving this other guy puking in the street and stayed out for a few hours by myself. Had a really good night in the end, met a bunch of new people and a pretty fun story, in hindsight. Went out with a girl, and had a great time together. I only knew her first name. We were texting later that night after our date and I told her to add me on Snapchat and gave her my username. She added me and up popped a request from first name last name. Her last name being my mom's very rare maiden name. She was my second cousin. We clarified things briefly and never spoke again. My blind date gave me an IQ test on the spot. When he found out that I had a good score, he said he won't be able to date me because I'm too smart for him and I will end up making his life miserable. Reddit. Do you have any WTF date stories? I once went on a date with this girl. We started with a movie. After the movie finished, as we were pulling out of the parking lot, she saw her father leaving the same movie with a woman who wasn't her mother. Yikes, that sounds like horrible position to be in. After our first date, he gave me a verbal report card in the car. One of my negatives was that I took too small of bites. Apparently my good table manners made him nervous, but one of my positives was that it seemed like I liked to be in the kitchen. About 2 hours after the date he called me to tell me that he had looked through my entire Facebook and read all of my blog. He had decided that I was cooler than he'd thought on our date, so he called the girl he had plans with the next night and dumped her to hang out with me more. Needless to say, there was no second date. Female. Upon further inspection, I have decided that your specifications meet my expectations. Report tomorrow for dinner and I shall continue your evaluation. I went on a first date with this guy who seemed really sweet. We went out to a really classy dinner. The food was great. The atmosphere was fantastic. But at the end of the main course, he whipped out his phone and started showing me pictures he'd taken of his dong. Like, different angles, lighting, dynamic effects. I rode with him to the restaurant, so I had to sit next to him on the ride home and fight the urge to fling the door open and tuck and roll. I have horrible self-esteem and date losers. Divorced over 10 years. Went on a date with some internet dude and he wanted me to stay over. Fine, but no way was I putting out with this one on the first date. Okay, fine. He says, why don't you come with me to the bathroom and make out while I jerk off? This has become a go-to line with my friends. Dated a girl for a couple weeks. Went back to her place. Started opening up to each other for the first time. Conversation was something like this. She got into talking about her family. Her talking about her bipolar mother. Her talking about her probably being bipolar because of it. Her talking about how she has no luck with men because she gets overly emotional. Her crying about it while I try to console her. Her accusing me of being just like every other guy that is going to leave her. Her yelling at me with tears streaming down her face to get the frick out of her house because I'm an butthole. This whole transformation took about 15-20 minutes. She also messaged me a week later asking where we should go on another date. I'm usually a sucker for helping people in need, but that is one case I am just not qualified to deal with. I had a gal ask me what I looked for in a partner. She seemed annoyed that my answer was rather general, and proceeded to pull out her list. It was 8 typed pages. She started going through them and giving me check marks. I didn't get very many. I had recently started dating this guy and we were on our way to Circuit City to browse around for a few things he needed for his computer. While in the car on the way there, an annoying techno song came on and I commented on how I couldn't stand how often they played it on the radio. He turned it up a bit telling me that he liked the song. I laughed and jokingly said, okay, well I'm not talking to you until this song finishes. I smiled at him and looked away, just enjoying the car ride. We park the car and I immediately sense that something is wrong. He's walking a few paces in front of me, clearly trying to avoid walking side by side. I let it go and run to catch up to him. I take his arm and kiss him on the cheek and proceed to walk to the store with him. Again, he seems distant. I ask him what's wrong and he tells me he's fine. I let it go and decide to enjoy the shopping we were there to do. We're browsing through the store and suddenly I realize that he's nowhere to be seen. It's around 7 PM at the time and the store was pretty crowded. I figure he must have wandered to another aisle and I do the same. 15 minutes later, there is still no sight of him at all. I'm walking through the store searching for him, and nothing. It's now 8 PM. I call his cell phone and it rings out. I walk out to the car, and it's empty. There are about 6 other stores in the complex and I wasn't about to walk to each one searching for him. It's now 8:45 and I'm getting scared. The store closes at 9, so there aren't that many people there. Finally, the store is closing and I walk out to the nearly empty parking lot. There he is, sitting in the car. I run over with tears in my eyes asking what happened. He looks at me calmly and says, now you know how it feels when the lines of communication have been cut. It was my freshman year of college and I had started dating this 23-year-old. He took me to Wendy's for a date because neither of us had a lot of money. He had one of those monotone voices and could drone on and on and on about nothing. He was telling one such story when I swallowed my water the wrong way and started coughing. This was still a date, so at first I tried to politely expel the water, but to no avail. As he continued to talk, I started hacking all over the table. Tears were streaming down my face, water was dribbling down my chin, and I was pounding my own back at a futile attempt to get the devil water out of my system. He kept talking. Trying to hold the water in at first was a bad idea. I could not stop coughing. I bent down under the table, hoping the angle would make it easier to cough up the liquid. Everybody in the whole restaurant was staring at me in silence, except for my date, of course. He was still telling his story. I finally finished hacking up my lungs and tried to listen to the rest of his story. I had no idea what he was talking about. He continued with his anecdote unfazed by my wet, red face and smeared makeup. When he finally finished, I apologized for my coughing fit and explained that I had swallowed my water the wrong way, to which he replied, "Oh, I was wondering what was wrong with you. Sounds autistic to me." The only blind internet date I ever went on, in 1993 no less. He took me out for dinner and a movie. We saw Schindler's List at the Dollar Theater. No lie, his choice. Afterwards, he told me he didn't believe the Holocaust happened. Dinner was at Burger King. My meal of chicken tenders and a small fry cost under $4 at the time. Afterwards, I bid him good evening and he complained that I didn't put out because he bought me dinner. Heck, even if I did it for a living I'd charge more than $4. I didn't stick around to go watch Apollo 13 and find out if he thought the moon landing was faked, and perhaps eventually barter my favors for an entire extra value meal. My self-esteem in college was low, but not that low. 9/10 dates I've been hooked up with via dating sites have all started out with a woman saying a variation of the following: "I'm not looking for a boyfriend, I'm just looking for a friend." Now I know I'm not the best looking dude out there, but come on, you've already seen my pic, recent too, and we met through a dating website for the purpose of dating, not hanging out. I went on a date with a guy who said he was getting into the elements and slowly has developed the ability to control fire. I can control fire. Most I use matches to start them and water to put them out. I'm white. I went out with an Indian girl twice who constantly talked about how India was so much nicer than the United States, how Indian culture is far superior to Western culture, and how Indian guys much more refined and attractive than white men. And then she dumped me for being white. What? Sounds like she dated you briefly to pee off her parents. I was on second date. This guy said he wanted to cook something elaborate for me. I met him at his house. He shows me his freezer and asks me to pick a frozen dish which he then puts in the microwave for me. Seriously, WTF material. Thank God that's all he had in his freezer. Once I went on a first date and the guy told me that I seem great. He just had one concern. I'm not saying you're fat, but I'm worried you will gain weight and not be attractive to me anymore. I was 110 pounds at the time, and I was eating a salad. Then in the car, he asked me for a beach. "B please." I wonder about men who disrespect women, then want to place their penises between the aggrieved party's teeth. I went out with a really gorgeous girl who I didn't know was bipolar and off her meds. She wanted to drive, so we took her car. We went to dinner, which was fine, and then a movie, where she got more and more agitated and then excused herself. I thought she was going to a bathroom, then said out loud, "No, she's bugging out," and walked out and found her in the parking lot searching for her car. She screamed at me that I'd been making fun of her. The people in the theater had been making fun of her, and the people in the movie had been making fun of her. I got her calmed down and got her home, and on the way found out that she was bipolar. She had stopped taking her meds. She was into self-harm. She beat her face black and blue right there in the car, and the car was stolen. She kept calling after that asking when we were going to go out again. Nope, nope, nope. The car being stolen is the cherry that makes this story truly fantastic. First date, drove around the countryside, explored abandoned building, went to the beach, had a great time overall. Second date, arrive at college jazz show, she is sitting with another dude, holding hands. I sit in the back of the room bewildered, whilst she turns around every few minutes grinning at me. Third date, drive around town, goof off in random stores, spontaneous Makirat session at stoplight, cause minor traffic jam, Have mind-blowing car sex next to a creepy power station industrial thing on a foggy highway. 4th date. Arrive to pick her up for date. She is chatting up another guy. Car drives up. She gets in and leaves, leaving me with some random dude who ends up crying. He turns out to be suicidal. Cries on my shoulder for several hours. We get burgers and talk about life, smoke a bunch of cigarettes, and have a strangely decent evening in the process. End up saving bawling woman from dude who is blocking her car trying to force his way into her car. 5th date. Frick that. Stayed home and had a wank. It's like a quirky romantic comedy, but with a realistic ending. As a guy, I've occasionally heard other guys say they aren't interested in smart women. As far as I can tell, it's because they are full of crap, and they know, at least subconsciously, that a woman with half an ounce of sense isn't going to put up with it. I think it's usually just the same as smart people aren't usually interested in any old daft bastard. Generally they want to be with someone about as smart as themselves. I was set up on my first blind date by a friend who swore up and down that this guy was perfect for me. I asked her if he knew that I am basically a very geeky goth and she said he had a thing for goth girls. Get to the restaurant and have a decent appetizer, talking about generic things like school, movies and books, and the server came by and took our orders, and when she left, he clapped his hands together and said, well, I guess we should get this out of the way. If we're going to date, there's a few things you need to do. I will point out now that he was not joking. He genuinely wanted me to do the following. Lose weight. I am 1.76 meters tall and 65 kilograms, 5 feet 8 and 145 pounds, 10 stone. I needed to lose 15-20 pounds. Dye my hair brown. My hair was pink and black. Get a tan. I'm white as a fish belly. Dress in the clothing he picked out. He told me he had excellent taste. Remove all my piercings. I had 17. No more tattoos. I had 2. My nail polish had to be normal. No black, green or blue. I would not be allowed to play video games, watch horror movies or read comics, because girls don't do that. Different jewelry. No more bats. I remember hearing all of what he was saying and just thinking this is a joke. A TV host will jump out and tell me I'm on a joke show. That never happened. People near us overheard this and began craning their necks, trying to look at me and see what was so awful. He ticked off all the things I needed to change and then sat back, smiled and asked when I would be able to get started. The server came back with our meals and I have a lovely plate of pasta in front of me. I don't know what got in my head, but I picked up my plate and dumped it into his lap. I left the restaurant, walked down the block and went into a convenience store and called a different friend to pick me up and told them the whole story. Cried a little and basically felt absolutely hideous. The person who set me up on the date was horrified. Said she had no idea he'd do something so awful. That was my first and last blind date. It's been a while since that awful day and I can proudly state that I am still as geeky, pale and obsessed with bats as I was then. And no one keeps me away from my SNES. People near us overheard this and began craning their necks, trying to look at me and see what was so awful. They were craning their necks to see if you would stab him in the neck with a fork. Plan for date is dinner and a movie. We were set up by a mutual friend and had been texting and talking on the phone and I was pretty excited. He shows up an hour late. I would have cut and run then, but I wanted to make the best of it. And he was good friends with one of my friends, so on the way to the movie I discover he already had dinner. I'm now starving hungry, so I make the best of it and grab chocolate bars at the gas station. He starts talking about how chocolate will make me fat. I'm a skinny girl. And still, who says that? So we're waiting for the movie to start and I'm munching on my snacks and he keeps going on about how I wouldn't want to get fat, being fat is so terrible. I smile and nod. On the drive home we start talking about movie editing. I ask him a question and I'm halfway through it when he cuts me off and says you're smart too. Now I'm really in love. Then he doesn't actually answer my question, just starts aimlessly complimenting me. When he dropped me off, I'm ready to dash but still too nice to be rude, and it's kind of a laugh. The guy is arrogant, shallow, rude, and can't hold an intelligent conversation. Now he's telling me about his gun collection. Oh look, there's some in his trunk. He wants to show me them, but I have an early class so I have to go. We never spoke again. can't tell if all the fat talk was him trying out his mad lead poo and negging skills, or him just being a total dong. I told a guy about my mom's upcoming surgery, not life-threatening. The guy said to me, well, because of where you grew up, maybe a death in the family would serve you well, you know, a character builder. People like you could really learn from that. So he wanted my mom to die? Great. Then he goes on to tell me a sob story about drunk driving and being in a coma and how he turned his life around. Bartender asks for his ID. I notice it isn't a license. I ask about it, and he says he got a DUI a few weeks ago. I could keep going. This date was epic. I ended up being saved by a stranger in the end who was witnessing my misery. Please, do go on. My date tried to crash her car into a tree. Neither of us were injured badly, but the car was wrecked. Later she confessed that she wanted me to become paralyzed so I'd never leave her and she can look after me forever. Help. She was trying to misery you. Holy frick. I thought we had the monopole for crazy dates in Italy, but reading the comments here I guess not. Okay, some of my stories now. I went on a date with a girl and during the date she showed me pictures of her boobs and her mom's boobs. She asked me which were nicer. I'm still not sure what she's doing with pics of her mom's tea in her purse or why she cares what a first date thinks of them. I did not go on a second date to find out. On another date with another girl, we went for a walk across the city. Guys she knew kept stopping her on the street to say hi and exchange a few words with her. Each time she'd tell me it was one of her brothers. Apparently this girl had over 15 brothers and randomly met them all on the same day. I still have no idea who these guys really were or why she clearly lied about their relationship. Another girl I went on a date with brought a female friend along. The female friend would always sit or stand a few feet from us and not get involved in what we were doing. She was just observing us intently. When I met the girl at first that day she said her friend liked to come along on dates, but that didn't make much sense to me. Near the end of the afternoon I ended up asking her what's up with her friend observing us from a distance with a weird look. My date replied, I told you she likes to come along on dates and watch us. I pushed for some more details, and my date finally let out, well, she really likes watching people on dates. It turns her on. You know, that's when I realized the weird look her friend had all day while watching us was actually a look or sexual arousal. I have never been so creeped out in my life. When I reach for the door, he tackles and shoves me aside so he can open the door for me. I thought it was an accident, so I laugh it off, commenting on how hard it must be for guys to follow all these rules of being gentlemanly, opening doors etc. and mentioned it's easier for me as there are fewer rules to follow. He gets a devilish look in his eyes and says women are expected to provide certain services to a gentleman. Oh frick no. Ugh. I cringed when I read this. What a creeper. I met a girl for some drinks. Not only was she the most lazy and bitchy woman I've ever met, but after she saw me pick up our drinks from the bar and bring them to her, she openly tells me that she won't be drinking it because I could have drugged it, and she didn't want me to rape her. I drank both drinks and stumbled the frick out without another word. Plot twist, she then raped you. For some reason the dates that I have been on, all OkCupid dates, I have turned into these guys' psychologist. The thing is that I actually try to help them. One guy told me all about his dong that was curved down and he was really insecure about it and that he suffered from terrible nightmares. I assured him that that's normal for a lot of guys and listened to his dreams. Another guy described to me in great detail at a California pizza kitchen how his mother was sexually, physically, and emotionally abusive. That one I really tried to be nice, but I was out of there in less than an hour. Another guy met for coffee and described his manic depressive disorder furthered by his recent breakup with his soulmate. I tried to give him a silver lining speech but he was having none of it. Another guy started our date yelling at his roommate over the phone because her cat shat all over his mattress. He was pee. He didn't really take it out on me, but he talked about how pee he was all night. Again, I listened and tried to be supportive. I think I may be too nice, or deserve a job in social work. You are a son. Had a girl bring her boyfriend to a date once. Apparently the two girls that set us up, mutual friends, didn't like her current boyfriend so she agreed to go out with me. But she didn't have a problem with her boyfriend so she brought him along. I dated a guy I thought was great until I came home to meet his mom one day. We walk in and she is all smiles and polite to me as she is tidying the house. He was getting ready for our dinner date and walked into the laundry room to get his clothes. Out he comes screaming at his poor mother and waving a pair of jeans in her face. When I say screaming, I mean his face was red and spittle was flying, all because she dried a pair of his jeans and they shrunk. She was reduced to tears and he actually got to the point where he just sat down on the couch and tugged on his shirt collar until it was shredded in his hands. I walked up to her and apologized that she had to deal with that and walked out the door. He ran after me crying and holding bits of shirt asking, well more like demanding, that I stay and begging me not to leave. I turned and told him that you just don't talk to someone like that, especially your mother, especially someone who was trying to do something nice for you, and there was no way in heck I was going to see someone who had such anger problems and lack of self-control. I mean, he was 20, that's no excuse. Kudos for the nice gesture for his mom. Worst date I've had. Well, I take it back, the date itself was awesome. We hit it off and had a lot of common interests. It was the end of the date that sucked. She asked me at the end of the date what my Facebook name was. I told her, honestly, that I don't have Facebook and don't have one. I still don't. She looked shocked. Anyways, since the first date went great, I asked her out again a few days later and she flat out told me no. Because, and I quote, I can't trust anyone who doesn't have a Facebook account. So glad I avoided crazy that early on. I had a guy flirt with me for about 3 weeks, and I don't mean little things. I mean he insisted on buying me drinks, played with my hair, complimented me constantly, and by the end of week 3 was very forward flirting wise, only for him to tell me he has a girlfriend. He decided to do this while we were watching a movie at his apartment, and then he tried to kiss me. When I called him out, he claimed he was just socially awkward and didn't realize I was taking everything romantically. Needless to say, I dropped any and all contact, except for when I saw him in the class we shared. He showed up to the next 3 classes drunk off his butt, and picked a fight with the guy behind him. Bullet dodged. I was on a dating site for a while, agreed to meet a guy for drinks after we emailed back and forth for a while. I should have seen the red flags. Is a lawyer, well educated, seemingly honest, claims to be a good looking guy, posts a deceptive photo of himself. I barely recognized him when I saw him. He refused to tell me where he worked, or his last name, explained his phone number is unlisted due to his profession. Then he proceeds to go through all of the photos on my phone when I tried to show him just one. I got the most expensive drink I could find, chugged it, then got out as fast as I could. Once went out with this guy on a whim, totally great first date, apparently went even better for him. He told me he loved me 2 days later. If anyone's interested, that was years ago and we're still dating. I give him crap about it to no end. Sell not virtue to purchase wealth, nor liberty to purchase power. BF. A blind date also. My guy first thought his Acura NSX, the older version, was a chick magnet. So much so, that he clearly felt no reason to act like a decent human being. We were sitting at a sports bar, talking and getting to know each other. About 5 minutes in, he starts arguing with me over nothing and starts insulting me. We weren't even talking about anything argumentative. He had asked me where I like to hang out in our city, then proceeded to tell me how stupid everything I was saying was. Anyway, he was the biggest dong I've ever met or even had a date with. I left when he went to the bathroom. I thought he might force me to go eat with him. I just couldn't handle that. When I was 15, I went abroad to Germany to study for a year. I was an awkward, anxious, nerdy kid and didn't make any friends, though one charitable soul offered to set me up on a date with a guy she knew from another school. I've never been the dating type, but I went along with it in hopes that it might crack some of the boredom. And what the heck? Maybe this guy and I might hit it off. Fast forward to date day, and I ask the guy what he wants to do. It's a small suburban town just far enough outside the nearest city for it to be a pain in the bus to commute to, and not big enough on its own to offer much in the way of entertainment for 2 teens on a blind date. This guy, let's call him Cool because that's actually his name, suggests going for a walk. Fine, I'm down with that. So we walk around, grab a coffee, and shoot the crap for about an hour or so. That's all the time I need to settle any doubt that this guy is not for me. He's not a bad guy. He just lacks even the faintest glimmer of intelligence. I ask him about his hobbies, and he tells me that he's interested in pipe fitting because that's the vocation he intends to go into at his father's request, despite his own indifference. I ask him if he likes to travel and he says no, but he's traveled a bit in his life. Where did he travel? About 45 kilometers west of the town he grew up in, when he got lost and accidentally crossed the border into the Netherlands on his moped. He then launches into a tangent, completely out of nowhere, about how women can't and shouldn't be allowed to operate motor vehicles. Hypocrisy much? At school the following week, the girl who set me up with this guy asked how everything went. I tried to be as diplomatic as possible and said that he seemed like a nice guy, but we didn't have much in common and thanks for making the effort, but I'm not interested in a second date. My host sister, who'd bullied me in subtle ways from pretty much within a week of my arrival, then joined my classmates and they both collapsed in paroxysms of laughter and high fives. Apparently the two of them had arranged this date as a prank, and had a bet with each other. If I had agreed to a second date, then BA, can't remember if it was the host sister or my classmate, would have won. If not, then BB. And if I had slept with the dude, well, I don't know. It never would have come to that. Needless to say that, upon learning of this scheme at my expense, I unleashed some serious bitch slapping. And at that commotion of hair pulling yelps and nails rending flesh, the balance was restored to the galaxy. I was on a first date with a guy I liked, and while he was driving, red Mazda Miata, he got a speeding ticket and asked me to pay for it. Since I was talking and he was distracted from the road, I was annoyed, but I took the ticket. He then took me to dinner at Hooters and asked me to pick up the tab so he can pay for us to get into some nightclub, where he spends the entire evening talking about other women he'd been with. Needless to say there was no second date. At what moment did you realize that the person you'd been dating was utterly batshit crazy? When I went to break up with her and she said no, that's not how it works. We both have to agree to break up in order to break up. Yep. Okay, then we're not breaking up. I'm dumping you. She was very clingy and didn't give me any space to hang out with friends etc. So I broke up. At that point I started realizing she was crazy. Every week she would keep sending me presents bottles of wine, t-shirts, etc. In the beginning I find it funny, after a while it got annoying, so I asked her to stop. She proceeded giving presents to my friends and tell them it was something that belonged to me which I had left at the place. Dude, free crap. Dated a schizophrenic for a minute. She was well medicated and for the most part pretty. It seemed pretty mild. She had a few issues with being kind of out of touch with reality, but that's expected. Then she freaking stabbed me over her birthday cake. He called me a bunch of times in the span of a few minutes, like, inhumanly possible amount of times. He then accused me of cheating because the floor in front of my bathroom sink was wet. Yes, this was his reasoning. Found out she had made a blog about me, was posting my personal stuff. She installed Find My iPhone app on my iPhone so she could keep track of my location. She added all my friends onto her social media contact lists, even girls I dated in the past. Changed her username, replacing her last name with mine. Went through my phone, email, chat messages like she was on a scavenger hunt. Found out she was taking nude pictures of me when I was asleep and in the shower without my knowledge. Got her cop friend to do a background check on my ex. Would keep track of the number of condoms I had to see if I was cheating. I was 16 years old, and we were in her hot tub. I was talking about this episode of Futurama that I had seen the other night. It was the luck of the Freerish. She just blurted out, "You know, if you left me, I'd kill myself." I hadn't even thought of leaving her until she said that, and then that's all I could think about. I stayed with her for months and months because I believed she would have, and I couldn't live with the guilt. I stayed with her so long that I began to hate her so much that I didn't even care at that point if she did kill herself. It was an important lesson on learning when to leave a relationship. If anyone is concerned, she did not kill herself. As far as I know, she is unhappily engaged. I hadn't even thought of leaving her until she said that, and then that's all I could think about. The plot of Inception 2. When she was threatening to cut herself with a steak knife in our bathroom, and when I said I was going to call the police, she punched herself in the eye and said she would tell them I did it. That is fricked. He told me I should stop taking my birth control, lest I go to heck. I should also ask forgiveness for thinking it was a-okay to take it in the first place. Even if I weren't taking it for contraceptive reasons, I would take it for other health ones. The latter didn't matter to him. Birth control was a device for someone looking to act on Satan's calling them to behave whorishly. He gave me a whole spiel on how I was only hurting myself in the end by being so selfish. Also, he said no one would ever want to marry his child's mother, but initially it sounded like he meant it was because of her behavior. Nope, it was because she'd had their kid out of wedlock. How this didn't somehow apply back to him beats me. Bullet. Dodged. Religious rules on sex rarely apply to men. Well, except ones relating to homosexuality. Those only apply to men. When he said that my dad deserved to lose his job because he was being paid by the military to kill people. He wrote satellite code for phones. This was years ago. He never worked in the military, and he's quite sure that his codes weren't being used to kill people. I hated my boyfriend. Didn't totally realize it at the time, but I did. And this was the last straw. You insult my father and I will beat you down, okay? I'll just yell you. Jerk. Wrote satellite code for phones. Paid by the military to kill people. The only logical conclusion. Between the first and second punches to the face, during a fight that started when I found sketchy crap on her phone. Please note I really hate myself for going through her phone, but she kept going through mine secretly and I really had nothing to hide, so I assumed she did. Bit of advice: if you feel the need to go through your significant other's phone, the relationship is already over. That last sentence is truth. Mine was kind of a whiny pain in the butt, but he bought us plane tickets to visit Savannah, where his friends lived, and I felt weird breaking up with him. And it was one of those things where it just kept dragging along, but I was beginning to realize he needed to go. This was about 5-6 months in. Then we went to his friend's party while we were Savannah. He got a bit drunk and started preaching to everybody about the freaking reptilian agenda. To anyone and everyone that would listen. For like 20 minutes. Lizard people. They're everywhere. And the government knows. I sat listening, shocked and horrified, until, being a little drunk myself, I just ripped him to freaking shreds. I was in the process of acquiring a degree in a research-based field, and I just tore his arguments apart without mercy. People were laughing at him, but I couldn't help myself. His own best friend came up to me later and said he was so sorry that had happened. I don't know what I would do if I found out someone I loved believed crap like that, and he was definitely not trying to hit on me. He was just as shocked. So that was an awkward plane ride home. I got real drunk. Hate to be this guy, but giggle reptilian agenda. I love the crazy buggers that push reptile overlords. It was the middle of January. She left my place, without a jacket, at the beginning of the night to go sit down on the sidewalk in front of the children's hospital. She spent all night out there in the freezing cold to show her support. She also wasn't eating or drinking anything. Also, she filmed herself picking up a guy at the mall, bringing him back to her place and getting him to massage her feet. The video was 4 hours long. She made me watch it to prove that she was faithful to me. A few weeks later she sucked a guy off in a closet at a Halloween party she brought me to. She was really hot and great in bed, but freaking crazy. Not worth it. He called me up after a year of dating. We hadn't seen each other in a week and he was sobbing. We're talking throwing up and sobbing. He kept going on and on about how he missed me. Don't get me wrong. I missed him too, but I knew I was going to see him in a couple days, so I guess I was just level-headed with my feelings. I knew in that moment I was dealing with someone who was a little off, but thought it was just a rare moment. 3 messy years later, his boss calls the police to do a wellness check on him after he threatened to commit suicide on Facebook for the 100th time. We had a huge blowout of a fight where, for the first time in 4 years, I yelled at him. I went to visit him in the hospital before they took him to a psychiatric facility, and he sat there and explained to me how everything was my fault. I am done. This is about how I knew mine was crazy. When she asked if I could watch her kid while she went on vacation with her parents, I said, wait, your kid? You have a kid? We had been seeing each other for a year at that point. She asked me to euthanize my dog because he was taking up too much of our time. And before you ask, yes, he was old, but not so old and infirm that euthanasia was at all justified. And also no, I did not euthanize my dog as she requested. But I did dump my girlfriend. But I did euthanize our relationship, as it was taking away from my quality time with my dog. My ex-wife's mother had just died and I went to the funeral to be there for my ex. We were married for 8 years. My GF lost her crap when she found out I went to the funeral. I tried to explain to her that her mother had died and she told me boo-hoo. People's moms die. At the time, my own mother was in the process of dying and yeah, she knew this. My ex's dad had a good point when any of his kids asked why he stayed in touch with his other kids' long-term exes. You can't be expected to love someone for years and then just instantly unlove them because circumstances changed. All separate EXS. 1. Told me he had people following me because while he trusted me, he wanted to make sure I wasn't lying to him about where I was. 2. Lied to me about having cancer because he wanted me to feel bad and stay in the relationship. Mind you, he witnessed me lose my mom to cancer a year prior. 3. Decided and suggested he wanted me to do all types of sexual things with him and his friends, while also doing really hard drugs. I flew out of that relationship like a bat out of heck. Maybe it was when he took too many drugs and tried eating quarters while telling me he had to go meet George Washington on the school bus. Or possibly when he hit himself on the head with a sledgehammer because I told him I was going home. Could have also been when he held a knife to my cat when I told him I wanted to break up. Or perhaps it was after I finally did leave, when he left me 50 voicemails that went back and forth between calling me a W, telling me about which drugs he was doing that day to forget me, and begging for me back. Or a month later when he egged my new guy's house. Take your pick, I've got more. More please. When I got home from work and thought nobody was home, he jumped out of my closet kind of like a flying squirrel with a crowbar demanding to know where the dude I was cheating on him with was. I was alone, and not cheating on him. Then he knocked the doorknob of my main apartment door off completely and flying squirreled away. This is my favorite image ever. Flying squirreled away. Thanks for that. I told him his co-worker grabbed my butt at the party we just left. He slammed his phone down on the street, tackled me, and started choking me. The neighbors came out and asked if I was okay and he started yelling it was none of their business and if they were smart they'd go back inside. I was so terrified to leave him after that. I was also very ashamed to tell anyone that I was with someone like that. It only ever happened when he drank, which was quite often. At least once a week we'd have an episode like this. I finally ended up telling my mom 5 months later and she helped me move out of his place while he was at work. You poor thing. I'm so glad you were finally able to speak to someone and your mom helped you get the frick out. Hope you're doing okay now. She asked me to pick her up from her friend's house. Normally this wouldn't be such a big deal, but when I got there I discovered that her friend was her H dealer and when she got in the car she was screaming about how pissed she was that she got shorted. For some reason I stayed with her for like 6 months after this. When I met her extended family, from BoJack Horseman, when you're wearing rose tinted goggles, all the red flags are just flags. It was my first major relationship. I was in college. I was pretty excited and pushing things to move too fast. Her parents were a red flag. Her maturity was a red flag. Her emotional state was a red flag. I just looked past it all and said, when we graduate it will all be better. Well, that time got close, and I was invited to her family's Thanksgiving out of state. I met a lot of extended family, but then I saw a black flag, and I took off the goggles and it was blood red. All the people who married into the family, or were fiancés, boyfriends or whatever, had to sit at a separate, smaller almost kids table. I was greeted. They were all nice and greeted me. Then the flag went up. I hear you'll be joining us. Well, we have sort of a support group together. This family you'll be joining can be hard to get along with. We'll get your email. It's good to have someone to talk to when things get rough. The rose tinted goggles fell off and I looked around and saw so many red flags. I didn't make a fuss the rest of the trip. 8 was nice. Thanked everyone, but told them I didn't think I would need the group. 1 or 2 said it was probably for the better and they understood my decision. We got back and I couldn't understand how I had tolerated all of this before. I broke up with her within a few weeks, shortly before graduation. After I graduated I left the state, which made things pretty easy. When I dated a girl we were both around 16-17, high school, mind you, and she would always have problems and tell me that something was wrong and then would refuse to tell me anything specific. That was hard to deal with on its own, but the real kicker was the time she was severely upset for a good 2 weeks and I got her to crack eventually and she said she was worried about postpartum depression ruining our marriage. Ruining our marriage? Yikes. Might wanna get that checked out. I realized it when I was reading a chapter in a book about relationship violence and every single item on a list of red flags reminded me of my partner. Also, I was lying about details of our relationship to my friend's family because I was afraid of what they would say in response. I had been dating a girl for a few weeks and realized I just wasn't feeling it in our relationship. So I politely told her that something just wasn't there for me, so maybe we should move on. She started sending me texts, like, a lot of them. One day I was in meetings all day and she sent me 184 texts. I counted. They started off with hey let's meet for coffee and talk, and progressed to frick you, I hate you, then into begging and crying and feeling alone and back to meet for coffee and talk with a little bit of you put your penis in me, and you dump me, and then she started the entire loop back again. She had an amazing conversation with herself, and when I refused to take the bait, she started calling people in my office. She took my office number from my business card and started calling numbers. For example, mine ended in 7045, so she started with 7046, 7047, etc. and asked them to tell me to call her, and that I was such a special guy to her. She was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. When she started punching herself in the face when I threatened to call the police to make her leave, she told me that I would be the one going. She wasn't kidding either, she was throwing haymakers into her own face. Needless to say, I learned right then that she was wired a bit differently than the rest of us. She would follow me around everywhere I went, and not tell me she was following me, as in, she would leave my house. Hours later I would go to class or to the store or something, and she would be stalking me in her car. She always checked up where I went. The funny thing is though, I was always loyal and faithful to her. She's the one who cheated on me. Crazy bee. When I tried to break up with him and he started stabbing himself in the thighs with a screwdriver while screaming, "Do you like seeing me hurt?" Well, now that you were gone, he had to get used to screwing himself. We were 16. I took her to my big family Christmas party. We were driving back with my family in our van. Christmas tunes blaring. Mum and dad in the front. My 9-year-old sister in the middle. Me and my girlfriend in the back. And that was when she decided to pull my dong out and start playing with it. Oh come all ye faithful, you like that joyful and triumphant, maybe I should spit on it. Oh come ye, I wish I could frick you right here. To be Bethlehem. I don't see the problem. Sounds like a keeper to me. He was religious. I didn't mind and encouraged him and even went with him to church, but I wouldn't convert. Apparently I'm going to heck. Not quite bat crap crazy, but anyway, I was the day that I'd managed to snooker her into definitively being wrong about something. She had a thing where she was always right, or put better, never wrong. She would never admit she was wrong about something. It was always someone else's fault or there was a loophole, excuse, etc. So the day came when I'd finally got her pinned in a no way out corner, snookered, a logical trap, etc. You were wrong, I said, after laying out all the evidence, making all my rightful claims, etc. She looked at me with a cold, emotionless, hard eye and said, "I'm not wrong. I'm never wrong." I was quite young and eager to please and looking to be loved, etc etc. But in retrospect, that was the day I subliminally knew the relationship was fricked. As far as I know, she's still not wrong and long-term single. Wasn't dating, but had a long distance internet relationship when I was about 17 or 18. I was lucky it was long distance because I was able to easily cut off contact when, according to what she told me, a pregnant woman insulted them, so she and her friend kicked and punched her to the point that she had a miscarriage. She sounded like she took a certain amount of pride in it as she was telling me all about it over the phone. I dated a girl and her whole family was batshit crazy. Her would tell me I'm suffocating her and I need to back off, and then tell me I'm not trying hard enough. Would call me crying about something stupid and deny she ever called me. Her mom told me she runs a candle business online, and then when I asked how her candle business was doing another time, she had no idea what I was talking about. Dad would throw temper tantrums all the time. He would openly flirt and check our women out when we were out for dinner, and he rejected my Christmas present. Why did I date her? I was only 20 and her body was fan-freaking-tastic. Well, Hank, I tell you what, sometimes that butt is irresistible. When she started randomly licking my face and laughing hysterically, she does it without provocation, sometimes in very serious or intimate moments. I love every batshit crazy thing about that girl. We broke up normally. A few days later a bag turns up outside my front door and it's soaking wet. I carry it inside and it's a hoodie I'd lent to her that was slightly warmed by wet. I thought nothing of it as it had been raining earlier that day and left it in my bath. I returned later to see yellow fluid coming out of it. She has pee on the jumper and returned it. I freaked out and went to contact her on FB and saw she'd been at a party and had burned a picture of me and then done the deed. Strange girl. When she decided to stop taking her meds, which I had never known she was on, at least, that was her excuse. But I couldn't ever tell what was truth or lies after riding the crazy train for months. Plus, if a zombie outbreak occurred and we couldn't get her meds, I would have chosen to be eaten by the horde rather than be stuck with her. Trip her and run, fool. I was the crazy one. I dated this guy who cheated on me and I never got over it, but continued to date him. I was so insecure and jealous. It would result in me calling all the time, getting upset if he looked at another woman or even talked to a girlfriend. Took me a while to sit back and realize what I had become. I broke up with him, and I'm now in an amazing relationship of trust, and importantly, I am very secure in who I am. I never want to be that crazy girlfriend ever again. I was dating a girl who was a bit into the party life but really sweet and kind. Didn't seem to be into anything too over the top. Then she broke into my house at 3 AM on a weekday when I had to work, woke me up and asked if I wanted to smoke an 8-ball of crack with her. I told her to get the frick out of my house. I leaned in for a kiss while we were okay a date, and when she said no I pulled away and respected her wish. She told everyone I sexually assaulted her. I worked with this girl for a while. We talked for a bit, started getting closer, and eventually we got together. A few weeks into the relationship, she got wide too attached. One day we went into our local town to do a bit of shopping and I said that we needed to go because I had an event to go to. She lost her crap right in front of everyone, saying that I didn't have time for her. This wasn't true whatsoever because we saw each other all the time, we weren't working, etc etc. We then went back to mine because her car was there and she carried on losing her crap. So I got in my car and drove off. Later on I rang her and said I'm done with this relationship because it's toxic. The next morning, she came to my house and spent at least 3 hours ringing my phone and knocking on my door when I was sleeping. I eventually told her to go away, otherwise I'll call the police, and that was the last time I saw her. I knew she was into wrestling, watching it on TV, but it turned out that she wanted me to wrestle her in bed, too, or to wrestle each other in the bathroom to see who would get to use the shower first. Everything was turned into a form of competition, to see who could end up on top. I see nothing wrong here. When I went home for a few weeks, and she slept with multiple guys, started smoking, doing codeine, and acted as though it was all normal when I got back. She claimed that her dad is the resurrection of Satan, in the serious sense, not just as a metaphor for him being strict, and she claimed that she had an invisible demon following her and it protects her from any harm. Intriguing to say the least. When he was sobbing about how I didn't believe him when I caught him in a lie and wouldn't back down, I stood my ground and suddenly it was like a switch flipped. He went from hysterical crying to a grin and said, "Yeah, you're right. I just didn't want you to think less of me." Somehow a grown man hysterically crying for basically no reason was supposed to make me respect him. We broke up. The first time she slept over was after a night out. Seeing her swallow a veritable pharmacy of medications for her various mental health issues that, up until then, had seemed very abstract, could have been a bit uncomfortable in any circumstances. Seeing her do it drunkenly and miss some pills and take double and triple doses of others, that was truly alarming. What is the biggest fail date you have ever had? Last year I decided to text a cute girl that I had class with the previous term to try to set up a date, and she responded with something like, "Sure, I was hoping I'd hear from you again." She said she's a good bowler, so we agreed on bowling, and the day of the date rolled around the next week. She was sitting on the railing outside the bowling alley waiting. Then when I got off the car and smiled at her, she said, "Oh hey, I wasn't expecting to see you here. I thought something might be up, but I couldn't think of a good response. So I acted like I wasn't expecting to see her either. I asked her if I should go inside and get a lane set up for us, and she said, yeah sure, just hold on a bit." I asked another friend to meet me here. When I asked who it was, she told me that it was her friend that just so happened to have the same first name as me. I went inside and handed over some passes for free games, put on my shoes, then put our 3 names in the machine. I didn't want to just start without her. So after waiting for 10 minutes or so, I got a text from her saying, "Where are you? I really don't want to be stuck here with this guy I used to have class with." So I found out that my instincts were right, but as a bowler with free bowling passes that were about to expire, I wasn't about to just leave. I responded, "Sorry, family emergency, I can't make it," and a minute later she came back inside and found me at whatever lane I was on. When I asked her about her friend, she told me that he wasn't coming. When I asked her if she was ready to start, she then told me, "I'll just watch. I don't really like to bowl. I only really came to watch my other friend. Supposedly he's a really good bowler." After that I told her, "Well, if you're not going to bowl, there's not much of a point in staying. I was just going to practice for a match anyway." We said our goodbyes, and I never heard from her again. TLDR. Set up a date with a girl I had class with the previous term. She mistook me for a different guy she liked with the same first name in her cell contacts list. Then she spent half the date waiting outside for this other guy while texting me saying, "Where are you? I really don't want to be stuck here with this guy I used to have class with." A few years ago I met a guy at a bar who was born on exactly the same day as me. That seemed like reason enough to accept his offer when he asked me out. He told me to dress up very nicely as we would be attending an art gallery opening. I got all dolled up, and when he came to pick me up, he was in a t-shirt and jeans. Okay, maybe I misunderstood the attire requirement. We got there and it was in a warehouse out in the middle of nowhere. It was actually an art gallery, but barely. Some of his friends were there, but he wouldn't introduce me to them and proceeded to chat with them and ignore me the entire evening. Meanwhile, I'm dressed to the nines and they're also all in jeans. After we left, he asked if he could take me out to dinner. I figured, whatever, at least I'd get a free meal out of this awful evening. We hit up a nice pizza joint and ordered a pizza. As I reached for a second slice, he just looks at me and says, "Wow, a second slice? Really? Geez, your house." So I ate the rest of the pizza. In high school I went out on a date with a guy from a different town who went to an alternative high school. Well, sort of a date. He met me at Boomers, Dave and Buster's kind of place with outdoor go-karts and indoor arcade. You get the drift, to hang out with mutual friends. The date started with him making out with one of my male friends up against a pinball machine and ended with my mom dropping him off at his grandparents' house, where he insisted we come inside and see his pet iguana. His grandmother kept telling my mom her skin was so soft and attempting to pet her, while his grandfather sat in the corner facing the wall. I was in the most confused state I have ever been in my entire life. I didn't call him again despite receiving multiple calls from him. A few weeks after the first date I got a string of IMs from him telling me he was going to overdose on pills because he was in love with me. Deciding to err on the side of caution, I called 911 and I met him telling him so. He IM'd me the next day saying a bunch of bull about how I had saved his life and that he was forever in my debt. For a while after that, about once a week or so I would come home from school to a bouquet of roses on my doorstep. Then I came home once to his grandfather's car in the driveway. The grandfather gets out and tells me that I should just date his grandson already. He also told me that I was a bee for calling 911 when I should have just gone over to his house to check on him, since he was behind him at the computer telling him what to type, and also said that he had been the one dropping off the bouquets on my doorstep. Jesus Christ. TLDR. Went on a date with the long lost grandson of Rufus T. Firefly. About 5 or 6 years ago I met a girl that came into my work. I talked to her for a little bit. We seemed to really hit it off. She asked me if I wanted to go get dinner sometime. She said she'd come pick me up and everything. That weekend we go out together to a restaurant on the other side of town. She was very interesting to me. I really didn't tell her a lot about myself because I kept asking her questions about the various things she was talking about. We just finished eating. I told her that I was going to get our meal since she drove us there. I had just given the waiter my debit card when I blacked out. This has happened 2 other times in my life, so it's not common. After my seizure was over, everyone in this restaurant was around me. People were holding my legs and arms. Everyone was scared and someone had called an ambulance. I call it my down feeling. It's the mood I'm in after I have a seizure. Everything seems different and it's kind of hard to explain. In this state of mind I get up to my feet. I looked all over the restaurant for her and she had already left. I thought she went to get help. I made the people wait for her as long as I could. I tried calling her. I didn't get out of the hospital until 1 AM. I had to walk 7 miles home because we don't have public transportation in this town. I never heard from her again after that. I went out with a guy who wore the puffy shirt from Seinfeld. I swear this was the same shirt. I looked beyond that, or at least tried to, and continued with the date. He later had a meltdown in his car because I said hello to a male friend we had seen while we were at a coffee shop and laughed when he told a story to me. He said my laugh was sexual towards him and that he shouldn't have fallen for me so quickly and wouldn't have if he'd known I'd cheat on him so fast. He was crying really hard the whole way back to my house. It was the most awkward car ride home ever. We never talked again. Holy heck. Dodge a bullet with that nutter. Oh boy. Well, I was about 18 and working in the city New York at my father's printing shop. I had met this guy a few days before on a bus going upstate to visit my friend. I tell my father I'm leaving early to go hang out in the city with a friend and I'm just gonna take the train home from there. I meet up with the guy, and almost immediately he's weird. Think Pepe Le Pew. Like he's trying to get all touchy-feely and huggy-squeezy on the subway. Then he pulls out a disposable camera and asks if he can take my picture and tell people I'm his girlfriend. I of course say no, but I was a big people pleaser and didn't want to hurt his feelings so I didn't end the date. But I couldn't wait to get away. This continued until we were walking down some random street and some lumpy bee waddles up to me and starts getting in my face. It was his girlfriend. I crap you not. We are in freaking Midtown Manhattan. And we just happened to pass her by hanging out with friends. I tell her to get the frick out of my face because I had no idea he had a girlfriend and I'm actually relieved she decided to show up. He starts to follow me and I just turn around and say, dude, you really don't want to do that. Trust me. Since my train wasn't for a while I decide to go back to the office to wait. When I got there I found my father cheating on my mother with a woman he hired to help with the filing. What a twist. Met her at the rec center. Next day we met to play racquetball. I hit her in the face. Twice. Did not get a second date. Not as mortifying as some I've read, but by far my worst date. It was a first date with a guy I met online. We'd had some nice conversations and decided to meet up one night for sushi. The night started off well enough, and I was really enjoying myself. About a half hour into the date, he starts getting a crap ton of texts and calls from who he claims is his dad. Being the slightly naive girl I was 4 years ago, I shrugged it off, but the texts kept coming. He never bothered to put his phone on silent and checked every single text. He said his dad wanted to go work out with him. At that point, I had a good handle on what was going on. Look, I told him, if you aren't into me, that's fine. But have the guts to tell me instead of relying on your buddy to bail you out. Actually, he replied while standing, it's a booty call. Thanks for dinner. And he freaking left. I sat there for a little bit. Embarrassed as heck because of all the sympathetic glances from the other patrons. The server brought the check over, but she leaned down to me and whispered, "I heard what happened. I took that butthole's order off, so you only are paying for what you ate." That's when I started crying in the middle of the restaurant. I left the server a massive tip for her generosity and spent the rest of the night drowning my sorrows in wine, Ben & Jerry's, and Love Actually. Sounds like you dodged a bullet if the dude ditched you to bang his dad. I definitely wouldn't stand for that on a first date. Reposting from an older but similar thread. God yes. The date was arranged by the college newspaper where I was attending school. I had never met, nor seen the person who I would be courting that night. I was only told that all expenses would be paid for. I was a college student. How could I turn down free food? We met up at a local Greek place while being followed by a film crew. She was great, charming, cute, funny, and could hold her own in a conversation. However, much like that exact Lego piece that you really need in a tub full of Legos, her crazy was well hidden. After the meal we went for a long walk on the beach. A few minutes in she leans in close and whispers, "Let's ditch the film crew." When a fairly hot girl asks you to find a way to get to a secluded place, logic is overtaken by hormones. The second they turned their heads we made a dash for it. We found a lifeguard tower that wasn't in use and made our way up the ramp. It was perfectly secluded, and it had the tactical advantage of being able to see if anyone was approaching. I leaned in for a kiss, expecting that was what she wanted. She put a hand to my chest and held me back. "Wait," she said. She was excited at this point and she made no effort to hide it. "You want to see my scars? No biggie. I've had creepier things said to me and I figured it was an excuse she was making to eventually get us undressed." I was game. Sure. She took off her shirt, not her bra, but it didn't matter as I was no longer fascinated with her boobs. All across her stomach were deep, crazy scars that scored her abdomen like corduroy. Scars so deep they didn't just change the tone of the skin, but changed the underlying shape of it and how it flowed. "Want to give me one?" What? What are these from? Memories. Give me one. She pulls out a hunting knife from her purse. The crazy was no longer hidden. She actually wanted me to cut her abdomen open. I've done it before. We'll just say that I fell while we were climbing the lifeguard tower. I think that the film crew found us. They were a good 50 yards away and were oblivious to the fact that we were there. I stood up and waved. Faked a blush like we were being naughty as this half-naked chick with a knife was hidden below me. She was not pleased and had a knife. I was mentally saying goodbye to my currently not stabbed body and was praying it would stay that way. The cameras were on though. She knew she had to play nice lest her crazy be known to all. She hid the knife, stood up, and giggled. The date continued. We played laser tag. I elected not to give her my number at the end of the night. TLDR. Chick drew a knife on me halfway through the night and asked me to stab her. I met a girl online. She seemed reasonably attractive and fairly easygoing, so I figured, hey, why not? We met at a local coffee shop and chatted for a few minutes before a mutual acquaintance of ours happened to show up out of nowhere and begin talking to the two of us. Turns out, they were both in AA together, and I then proceeded to learn her long and sordid history of alcohol abuse, and the real reason for her wanting to date. Her exact words were, "I'm trying to replace my boyfriend who died this summer." So, the guy decides to invite himself along for our date, neither of them asking me if it was cool for him to do so. We end up driving to a bar, a fine thing for a couple of recovering alcoholics to do, and the entire time they're playing the absolute most god-awful music on the radio I can think of. I'm in the back seat. This horrible crap is blaring over the speakers while the two of them are chatting, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, how can I find a way to get out of this? So we get to the bar and they proceeded to drink coffee and play a hockey while I tried to think of a way to leave. I ended up faking a cell phone call from my friend, saying I needed to go because she was in the hospital. The girl then proceeds to freak out at me for bailing on her during our date, at which point I just stared blankly at her for a second, blinked, and walked away. Haha, nice reaction at the end. The summer after graduating from high school I went on a date with a girl I had been friends with for a while. We decided to go to a fair a few towns over. We walk around, eat some fried foods, go on a ride or two, Things were going great and many laughs were had. We then went on a ride similar to a zipper salt and pepper shaker. Lots of spinning upside down and so on. About halfway through the ride, the funnel cake I had earlier decided that it did not want to remain in my stomach. With her sitting next to me, I commence throwing up, and then we flip upside down, and my bath comes right back at my face. I had enough sense to keep most of it away from her, as she emerged from the ride puke free. I did not. We have now been dating for over 6 years, are currently engaged and will be married next summer. That's awesome. I'm glad you didn't chicken out of shame. Lots of guys do that. Met a girl on an online dating website. Seemed normal enough. Take her out to dinner for our second date. After having good conversation on different topics, she casually says, "I don't usually show people this so early." She then proceeds to pull out a book where all the pages are frayed. I'm like, oh cool, what book is that? It was something I can't even remember, but the next thing she said was, "I eat paper, and I eat this book." I tried to play it as normally as I could and asked her questions about it. Ended the date with a hug. Now that I think about it, it wasn't the real deal breaker, but still, what the frick? I went on a date with a Redditor. We met up, got dinner, saw a movie, and went back to my place to just hang out and chat. Long story short, he got on my computer, got on Reddit, and 1 awkward hour later, I drove him home. Y'all, if you aren't impressed with a date, just let them know. Don't Reddit at their house awkwardly and act really weird. No bueno. Redditor wife on the first date. My friend R set me up with a blind date. We were going to go double dating with him and his girlfriend. Talks me up on how hot she is and how she looks like my type. Later on, after getting some pizza and soda, I meet my so-called hottie. It was my cousin. We looked at each other and just started laughing. I never had R set me up again. I went on a date with a girl, crashed at her house after no hanky panky, and was woken up by her irate Hispanic boyfriend at about 7 AM the next morning. The odds of that happening are 1 in a million. Things were going good. I mean real good. The city was celebrating its glorious playoff victory. The local heroes were 1 win closer to winning the Stanley Cup. Women were, shall I say, juiced about the victory. Liquor was fueling the celebration and breaking down inhibition barriers. Enter me, enter her, me. So, pretty fun night. Her. Yeah, too bad the bar's closing soon. Me. Yeah, her. I have my friend's place to myself tonight. Want to come over? Me. Wait, what? 30 minutes later. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug, her. Do you have a condom? Me. Number. Her. There is a store up the road. Here are my keys. Bye now. XXX. Me. Okay. 30 minutes later. Where did she live again? Fuuuuuck. One of my workmates was always talking to his sister on the phone, at least once a day. I chimed in on a few conversations and she laughed, said I was funny, so we arranged a blind date. When she first arrived to the restaurant, she insisted on meeting separately. I saw a splitting image of my workmate wearing a wig. I had the hardest time trying to get the image of my workmate out of my head throughout the date. We start talking and the conversation is fun and somewhat lively. For dinner, I order pie, because frick it, I like pie. I ask her, do you like pie? She responds with a scowl and cold shoulder. I'm thinking that it's a little weird, so I follow up. I love pie. I'm pie again. She responds with the same cold shoulder. She doesn't talk until the food arrives and I dig into my pie. She looks at me confused and says, did you say pie or pot? What about pot? I mentioned I love pie. A look of relief flows across her face as she explains to me that she thought that I was talking about weed. This seems odd to me, especially since I participated in marijuana legalization protests in college, so I inquire deeper into her standoffish attitude regarding weed. It turns out that she's considering becoming a nun. I'm an atheist. This is her first date ever, not for me by far, and she's never kissed anyone. We're 23 at the time, so this is somewhat understandable except for the nun part. I decide to play along for the rest of the date. I kind of felt sorry for her at this point. We walk back to her place. She invites me inside. Covering the back 10-foot wall is a 10-foot shrine to the Virgin Mary. Right next to her bed, She tells me to sit down on the bed and she starts awkwardly kissing me. I keep looking over at this huge statue of Virgin Mary staring at us along with images of my workmate in the back of my mind. It was too awkward, too weird. I wished her a good night, never talked again. First date. Beautiful ice blue eyes, curly blonde hair, German as frick with a very thick accent. She was very skinny, but wearing baggy clothes so I didn't think much of it, and Germans wear weird crap, right? The date goes awesome. We eat some food, during which he keeps going to the bathroom, then we eat some ice cream, during which he also keeps going to the bathroom, then we go for a walk and hold hands, and eventually we end up checking into a matrimonial suite at a youth hostel. We are making out when suddenly and she stands up and backs away from. Then she says, in her thick accent, "Do you like that you see?" and takes off her clothes. It is at this point that I realize that she has an eating disorder and she is wildly, sickly skinny. She starts begging me to have sex with her and I think to myself, wow, this is really a pickle as I have no sexual attraction to her anymore. But I don't want to be in butthole and have her put her clothes back on because she clearly has some major body issues. So I start kissing her, touching her, and generally trying to both defuse the situation while also not rejecting her. At one point she tries to get me to finger bang her, but here's the craziest thing. Her vagina was completely dry, and so tight that I couldn't even get a finger in. I remember asking her how she fit tampons in and she said, "Oh, I haven't had a period in almost a year." Somehow an hour later we ended up clothed, holding hands, and fell asleep on the bed. I think I was pretty gentle about it, and we kept up in emails for a little while afterwards. She always seemed fairly positive towards me, however. Now I always make sure to check for dat butt. Ladies, we're only looking out for your health. Let's keep this short and simple. Went home with a girl I met at a bar. As I was leaving her apartment, she introduces me to her roommate, my ex. My very first date ever. We went to see The Passion of the Christ. Dude, you have to practice years to do one night stands at the difficulty level. I had my first date ever in 9th grade, all planned out with a girl I really liked. When I was running through the plan with my friends, they reminded me how socially awkward I was and that if I couldn't carry the conversation throughout the date, there wouldn't be a second one. So me being the smooth guy that I am, I decide to prepare by googling how to talk to a girl and conversation starters an hour or so before the date. But I was too nervous to memorize the questions, so I wrote them down on my palm for future reference. We went to a sushi place at her suggestion. Of course I say I love sushi to convince her I am a sophisticated and worldly gentleman, but I'd never had the stuff before. Turns out that green substance they put on the side of the sushi roll is not, in fact, guacamole. It is wasabi sauce, which I can only describe as a combination of horseradish, fire and heck. So I ate the whole chunk of it and there I am, practically sobbing and oozing mucus out of my nose when I decide to distract her with a tactical conversation starter. Only problem is, my palms were too sweaty and all the ink had bled. I didn't notice while I was wiping the wasabi-induced snot storm off my face, so now my face was covered in bled ink and snot while she stared blankly at me wondering what to do. I saw myself in the reflection of window and I was in so much pain and so mortified that I just started crying. We ended up having to call my mom to pick us up early. Shut up. I was in 9th grade and drove home in silence except for the oldies station my mom had playing on the radio. My mom let me use her sweater to wipe my face off. We ended up being friends later on in high school and laugh about it now. To this day, she thinks I was only crying from the wasabi. TLDR ate a whole bunch of wasabi thinking it was guacamole. Face covered in ink. Snot and tears of shame. Friend-zoned. No number for jackature. Dude, that is hilarious. My buddy Manny did the same thing. Chowed down on a big glob of wasabi thinking it's guac and nuked his sinuses. For extra irony points, he's half Japanese and half Mexican. He should have been able to recognize either wasabi or guacamole. What's your biggest fail when it comes to online dating? I was talking to a girl who mentioned that she was into photography and I asked her to send me some pics. She thought I was asking for nudes, so she deleted and blocked me. I talked to a girl who lived in a town 25 kilometers away. She was nice and pretty, so I asked if she wanted to meet up and she said yes, so we met up at her farm. She was a terrible conversationalist. I couldn't get her to talk about anything, and when I talked about myself she seemed really bored. I was halfway though a sentence before she interrupted me to suggest going to the takeaway shop in town. We went there, still terrible conversation. Decided to talk about my trip to London, and that actually got her going. She talked for 5 minutes about how she always wanted to go to Canada as a little kid and that the next year she was finally going to get married. Honestly thought she was joking, but later realized she was serious about it. The rest of the date went pretty crap too. We didn't watch a movie like we planned. We watched the rest of the movie she had started watching the night before. She took a bite of her burger and threw up in the toilet for 10 minutes because it was too greasy or something. She then suddenly remembered she had to go pick something up from a mate 70 kilometers away, and I needed to leave immediately, so I did. Had no interest in dating her after that, obviously. The next day I decided to text and ask how she was, cause she mentioned going through depression recently and I didn't feel right just ignoring her after that. It's been almost 2 years since that date and I am still waiting on the reply. And lastly, my 4th date on a dating site went horrible as well. I thought this girl was perfect and we actually spent the whole day together. When I got home we still talked and I thought it was a sure thing. 2 days later she stopped messaging me altogether and told me the day after that we need to break it off because she recently started seeing someone else and feels bad just abandoning him like that. It broke my heart, but we remained friends. I asked her out again a week later and she said yes. We've been together a year and a half now. This, right here, that's exactly what this thread was made for. Amazing. I met with this very attractive woman off upper middle class Tinder, Bumble. She was way hotter than me. At some point during the evening, she leans forward on her bar stool, narrows her eyes and goes, "I know there was some reason I swiped right on you." Because at this point she could not remember. Putting all my eggs in one basket. Once I start a conversation with one person, I just stick with that person until I know it's not going to go anywhere. I can't deal with trying to remember stuff about 2+ people at the same time. I don't mind though if the person I'm talking to is talking to more than one person, as long as if we're on a date, they're not on the phone to them or mix us up. Casually dating multiple people is exhausting. Plus I always get drunk and mix up details between them, and women do not like that. I matched a girl who looked really cool and complimented her hair. She responded with something along the lines of, "I'm so glad you messaged me. Most of these guys just match and never message." I've seen almost exactly the same line before from bots, so I assumed she was a bot and said something snarky about it. She replied, upset, and then unmatched me. Someone once asked if I was a bot. I replied bleep bloop hello and they unmatched me, whatever, I'm hilarious. Her husband. You have no idea how many neglected wives are out there online and they love to omit the fact that they have husbands. Watch out for the MILFs. She'll break your heart and her husband will break your neck. Not being exciting or witty enough in the text game. In real life my expressions and demeanor save me, not so much online. I'm the opposite. I'm so smooth over text but super awkward in person. My texting personality and in-person self are basically two different personas, which is probably off-putting. She was being flirty but I just kept asking how's your day going, what are you up to, and other generic questions until she stopped and never messaged me back. Step your freak game up, son. Chatted with them a year by phone. Once we met we had nothing to talk about and it was the most awkward encounter of my life. Sometimes chemistry fails to translate to viral. If it was a good fit, you would still have had topics of conversation. Oh man, the first time I contacted someone, it was via the Onion personals, which were really a thing in 2005. I just made fun of a band she said she liked. I wrote something like, "My only problem is that you are into band." She replied, as she should have, "My only problem is that the only thing you offer is a criticism." I still cringe. Getting hundreds of matches on Tinder but not going on a single date with someone I initially met from the app. I always match with ads. Matched with someone on a dating website before Tinder. Got to talking. Seemed like a chill dude. Even though there were red flags, he insisted we were dating before we met and I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. Agreed to meet up with him at a cafe by work. Organized with my receptionist, she would ring me at an allotted time and tell me I had to come back to work. So I had an out. Met with the guy for coffee. It seemed well enough. Then my girl rang me. So I told him I had to get back. His response was, "I've got my work van here. Do you want to jump in the back and have a quickie?" I noped out of there and went back to work. A couple of months later he ended up coming into my work to see my boss. I made polite small talk with him, then when he left my boss called me into her office to ask how I knew him. Turned out he was married to my boss's niece and I dodged a freaking bullet. Update. Sorry to leave you all hanging. Boss believed me, and we never spoke of it again. I was too embarrassed to raise the subject again because I keep my private life private, and her because I assume she kept that crap between her and her niece. My boss was also a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so not the person to frick with. Yes, I should have known better when he got possessive straight out the gate, but I was young, insecure, and lonely. It's not a crime to want to be wanted, but good lord was I a naive fool. Dated a guy who was in a policy PhD program, confirmed, who had a law degree, confirmed, but had left practice because he didn't enjoy it. Nope. Had been arrested for a federal hate crime as a neo-Nazi and was ineligible to practice. Thank God for Google. I'm slightly leery of trusting Google like that completely. I'm a regular working schmuck with no criminal record, but someone with my identical name was arrested and convicted of corporate embezzlement from his own company or something like that. When I connected Spotify my Bumble profile, and unbeknownst to me, 3 of my top 10 artists were the Wiggles, High Five and Blippi. Pretty sure I missed a few connections because of that. Do the propeller. Do the propeller. I thought I had a pretty sick pickup line, which was, "You're so cute you make a baby deal look like a pile of crap." Needless to say, I'm still single. Thanks man. I needed that laugh. Using Plenty of Fish, the free dating site. It was like the Netto of dating sites. I chatted briefly with one woman before telling her I was going out for a few drinks. Next day I checked my messages and she had sent some. It started with, "Why don't you come round to mine and get drunk together?" Progressing to, "Why are you ignoring me?" Then to, "I think you're gorgeous and we will be good together," and finally, "Don't you freaking ignore me." I sent her a message the next day to never contact me again. Went on a date with a girl from Tinder one time who told me that she found children very attractive. After that I stopped mentioning that I had a child on my profile, and took down the pic of me and my daughter, and just brought it up with the girls that I felt were likely to stick around after meeting in person. I tried Tinder, stopped when it was searching so wide it started showing me women in neighboring countries. Didn't get a single match. I used Tinder and Bumble and it's now showing me women way outside of my radius, and most of them live in a different part of the country and are just around for the weekend. 0. I was 18. Just registered to Tinder because I wanted to get my first girlfriend and stuff. Then I match with this beautiful girl from Switzerland. She is staying in the city for 2 days and want to meet at her hotel to have a fun time during the afternoon. My 18 years old self didn't see anything fishy in that. So 30 minutes later I'm at her fancy hotel waiting for her to come down to pick me up. But she says she is waiting for her mom to leave. So I wait for about 20 minutes and I see an old man checking out of his window. So I text the girl that there was a creepy old man being afraid that I was going to rob the hotel or something, haha. 10 minutes later she tells me that another dude is arriving and that she invited him before me but he couldn't come, so she invited me after. So we would have to decide between the two of us who would get the girl. I saw the guy arriving, a handsome looking, mid-20 guy, and so I started to explain the situation to him and that we should just play rock paper scissors or something and not think too much about it. And he accepted, hahaha. I was so surprised. He lost. I won and left without a word. The girl then tells me that in the end her mom isn't leaving so we cannot meet. I text her it's okay and wish her a good end of holidays and that maybe we will meet in Switzerland one day, who knows. 20 minutes later I receive a text from the girl telling me that in fact she was a dude. The old dude that I saw looking out of his window. He was a retired man with no real hobby and had fun doing this kind of thing and watching, sometimes dudes even fighting to get to frick his fake profile. He never told anyone but me because I didn't insult him, and I resolved the problem with the other guy pretty simply so he knew that I wouldn't get mad at him if he told me. After that I talked to him for an hour about how he should find another hobby like gaming, reading or something, and after that we never talked again. I felt really sad for him in the end because he didn't have any family or friends, but all this was really fricked up. Since then I never tried to meet an online girl directly at her hotel. That's an amazing story, dude. Finding a wonderful guy and then cancelling the date last minute because I wasn't over my ex. Joke's on me. We rematched 10 months later. He gave me crap about my behavior last time and told me because of that I had to come up with an idea now. March will mark our 1-year anniversary. Tell us how you find the wonderful guy. We need pointers. Assuming that the stupid OkCupid match percentages meant anything, I did a bunch of the questions and, being a person who believes in numbers and statistics, mostly attempted to chat up guys who were, apparently, 80-90% similar to me. 50 plus messages over a 8-month period and 3 unsuccessful dates. But it worked out in the end. I reached the Jane Goodall observing primate behavior level of not giving a duck. Saw a decently attractive man around my age. Also, so many people try to get with you despite being 20 plus years older, with an interesting profile and a 70% match, and sent a question about his work. We're married now. My husband and I were matched at about 67%. Part of why I didn't reach out to him initially. Apparently you and I had a similar experience. I always made my bio too long. I really took the time to type it up, even after realizing no one read them. I had more fun making the bio and answering the questions than using the site for what it was for. OkCupid. Also couldn't stand one-word answers and ended up writing paragraphs. I'm really bad at talking to people through text, I guess. I end up befriending the girls I meet instead of dating them. To me a girlfriend should be a friend too, but that doesn't work for most people, so I just have a lot of friends now. Which is all cool until you end up crushing after one of them who doesn't feel the same way about you. A girlfriend should be your best friend. I don't really understand when people say they're so isn't a friend. Thank you for the gold, stranger. Merry Christmas. Guys keep wanting to come over to hang out. I live alone. Not comfortable having someone I never met over. It's a major turnoff for me. Therefore conversation ceases there. Hahaha, as a guy I'm scared of meeting people in real life or private settings too. I realize the risk is bigger for a girl, but I'm still scared of accidentally agreeing to spend my time with a crazy person. Most of the fails are typical not super hot guy problems. Almost no matches or messages, depending on the site. The biggest fail in my ex. We spent 5.5 years together. I was super supportive of her, getting her on her feet in life, covering expenses for the first 2 years until she stabilized, helped her find her first job, helped her through college, helped her get her first job after college, helped her with her first job after college. But then the moment I start struggling with money finding a job, we moved across the country for the one she got, she kicks me out. I mean, I was struggling for a while. About a year, a month after she kicked me out, I managed to land a job. Good times. One time I chatted with an actuary, risk manager, but I thought he was an aviary, a giant bird cage, so he blocked me. I was 20. Reminds me of the time I learned the hard way that a mongoloid is not a person from Mongolia. I went on a Tinder date with a chick one time and her profile gave off no red flags, and the way she messaged and texted also gave off no red flags. I get to the bar and she looks a little different, but I'll let it slide. She begins to tell me she forgot to take her bipolar meds so she shouldn't drink too much, then proceeds to have 5 Long Islands by the end of the night. She tells me she wants to come back to my place, so we go back, watch a little TV, and her phone rings. She silences it. I didn't think too much of it, then it rings again, and again. I finally ask and she says that's my old man. He couldn't hold me down. I tell her okay, well I'm not one to get between people, and I offer to buy her an Uber home. She whines for a while, but I was done with her on this date. The Uber eventually pulls up and I walk her outside, and what a coincidence. Here comes her old man. The guy comes at me trying to get in my face and she starts yelling at him, calling him a psycho for tracking her phone. They start arguing pretty bad and I slowly start backing away. Within 5 minutes, they were making out in the back of the Uber, which BTW I got charged $15 for making him wait, and he eventually told the Uber to go. He was gonna drive her home. And there was that. I went back inside, hit my bong and watched Rick and Morty with my cat. Now that's how you end a story. Talked with a guy a lot over text for a long time, getting pretty close. One time I was doing shopping with a friend and we decided we would go see the last Star Wars movie before heading back to her place to get ready for a party. Sent him a text asking if he'd like to join us for the movie. I didn't realize he had to catch a train. Came in late. Smelled terribly. Kept trying to talk to me during the movie. I hate that. Tried to convince my friend to leave us for the night but I was supposed to sleep at her place and he didn't live in the city. I didn't want to be left alone with him because he gave me creepy vibes. After that I told him I didn't want to keep in touch, and kept sending me drunk texts even after months of no contact saying I was the move of his life. Ended up calling me a B and then apologizing by making a website with a letter on it. I blocked his number. Agreeing to meet up with a guy whose profile said he was in prison for several years for a non-violent felony. High school me was stupid. Tell us the tale, please. Sending two men a texts and scaring them away. I now know how annoying it can be. Time zone differences don't mean you have to send a million messages at a time. They could be working, or sleeping, or just out with friends. Make profile. 0 matches. Give up and delete. Wait 1-2 years. Make profile. No matches. Give up and delete. Now that 100% of the platforms lock you out of messaging unless you're being matched first, online dating is pretty much dead to me. I went on a date with a girl and 2 weeks later she died of acute pancreatitis. I'm convinced it's because she went on a date with me. Getting a free trial of Tinder Gold on an account I'd had for at least 8 months in 3 main geographic locations, and proceeding to swipe right on every single one of the guys that had liked me, all 2,500 of them. Nothing other than anecdotes and thousands of messages has come of it yet. Oh also, I did this at 9 PM the night before a huge college math exam. Procrastination at its finest. 2,500. Cries with 0 after months. Girl sends one word message hi. Okay, it's not easy starting a conversation, so no problem. I reply with a medium length message. I comment about some interesting hobby mentioned in her profile and ask for more details. I tell her about my day, some other random stuff. Overall a good effort. The next day she replies, hi, how are you? She was pretty. We met online, dated for several years. We had our issues, but we always worked them out. On Christmas morning, yesterday, she was in a foul mood. Told me to take the presents she bought me and to leave her house. Didn't even want to open the presents I got her, including a diamond engagement ring. It still hurts this morning. Ouch, that hurts to read. Hope the situation clears itself up. She'd probably sad about it too if she knew what you had in mind. I tried Tinder for a while. After a month or so I contacted and was talking with this girl and things seemed to be going well. We had similar interests in music and movies, similar sense of humor, etc. Eventually we were talking about hobbies and I casually mentioned I played Magic the Gathering. Immediately unliked. Like, she had time to receive the message. Click the menu and hit unlike. That fast. She knew you'd have no money for dates. Expecting an instant connection from text 1 and then being disappointed not meeting up or going on a second date when there aren't fireworks the first time you meet for coffee. Don't get me wrong, instant connection and a spark upon meeting is definitely possible, but far more often, two people with zero personal or physical connection are meeting for the first time off an online dating site. They need to figure out if they can physically exist in the same space comfortably before seeing if there are any romantic or sexual sparks there. I think a lot of people mentally skip this step, so when they do meet someone from online, they can have a pleasant enough time. But because so much of that first date was just taking that person in and getting comfortable, they won't necessarily feel chemistry and then get disappointed. I had a nice time chatting but I didn't feel anything. If the conversation was there and you enjoyed the other person's company, go on the second date and those elusive feelings may actually arise. Because now you're over the hump of being comfortable in the other person's presence. If you still feel nothing after date 2, then no harm no foul. Go your separate ways. I think a lot of potential relationships die before they can start because we have this preconceived notion that you must feel something right away, and if it's not there immediately, it's not pursuing. Only met up with one from all the matches I had. He looked like Orlando Bloom. Got so nervous although he was very nice to me. Turned out he just wanted sex and I left, haha. You made the right decision. Please post recent photos of yourself. My one friend's online picture show him 40 pounds lighter from a few years ago. My other friend's photos show her from 11 years ago. She thinks she looks the same. She does not. And they both wonder why they are not having success with online dating. I went to go meet this girl for the first time and I go to pick her up. It's dark outside and I stop in front of her house. As I am waiting for her, this girl opens the back door of my car and sit in the back. Keep in mind it's dark outside, so I say hi and tell her it's nice to meet her and if she would like to sit up front. She's insisting she's okay in the back and we should start driving. I find this kinda strange that she wants to sit in the back as if I am her driver. I keep insisting that she should sit at the front and it's strange that she wants to sit in the back. Again she says she's okay in the back and I should drive. At this point I figure at least she in my car and maybe she's shy because it's our first date. I start driving and I am having small talk like how was her day and I am glad she decided to meet me. She's giving me short answer and quiet for most part. We are approx 2-3 in our drive when I ask her if she's okay going to this restaurant I know. At this point, she goes, I only called you because I need a ride. I am not here to date anyone. So I am really annoyed by now and I tell her I am not her driver and I only came to pick her up because we were gonna hang out and go eat something. Now she's also annoyed by now and tell me if I don't stop the car she will call the police and is ready to jump out of my car. I pull over and tell her she's crazy if she think I will drive her home when this was supposed to be a date. She tell me I don't date random Uber drivers. Long story short, the girl that sat in my car was a different girl as she mistook my car for an Uber that was supposed to pick her up. Thank God I had the dating app to show her. Imagine she starts screaming and called 911 secretly and I get surrounded by the police. At least I had a great story to the when I went back to pick up the right girl. I have a very dry and sarcastic sense of humor that works great when I can use vocal inflection and body language. But a lot of the time I just seem like a prick if it's read over text. Here's a different kinda story. Was on a dating site talking to this guy for about a year. I'm not hugely confident so took me that long to suggest we meet. His response was to delete his account. About a month later an account with a similar name messaged me. It was him. He apologized and asked if I would forgive him. He'd just been nervous and would like to talk again. We talked for another 6-ish months, with me thinking, I'm leaving it up to him to suggest we meet. Eventually we met. Both quite scared. Hit it off and chatted the whole night. He proposed a little under 3 years ago and we've been very happily married for a year and a half. What first date behavior is a deal breaker? I think when they don't even ask you about yourself. Maybe that sounds weird, but I had a date that would be constantly talking about her life and friends and whatnot. I would ask her questions too but she never once asked me about anything. My boyfriend has a friend like this. She literally never wanted to ask questions or get to know me unless I offered up details about myself. Even then, she'd turn the convo back to her. Possessive behavior. If this is how you act with someone you've just met, how would a relationship with you be? TLDR. When he hands you his wallet with lots of cash in it to show off. When he takes you to a strip club. When his friends show up on your date and when they spike your drink. Went on a first date a few years ago. He took me to an exclusive members only club. Bought the most expensive bottles of wine. Handed me his wallet to pay for the wine. Then excused himself to go to the bathroom. Also I could see how much money he had. He had well over £2,000 in there. I thought that was weird, but chalked it up to him trying to impress me in a weird way. I wasn't. After that, he took me to a strip club where the bar staff knew him by name. I was incredibly uncomfortable, but it got even worse when two of his friends just coincidentally bumped into him at the club. Sat with us. then hired strippers to sit on their laps. I stayed 5 minutes, then excused myself to the bathroom. The plan was to come up with an excuse to leave as soon as I got back. I returned, took another sip of my champagne, which I'd stupidly left unprotected before heading to the bathroom, stayed another 5 minutes, then said I had to leave. They tried everything they could to get me to stay, but I refused. As soon as I stood up, I felt lightheaded, and finally understood why. My drink had been spiked. I panicked and walked off, with my date following me desperately begging me to stay a little longer. He then offered to get in the taxi with me and escort me home. I refuse. I got to the taxi rank, got into a taxi, and we had a heated conversation with him offering to escort me home and me responding with I'm a big girl and can take care of myself. Taxi driver must have sensed something was off and he intervened telling him I'd said no, and that was that. He drove off, asked for my address, got me home safe and sound. By then I was passed out in the back of the taxi. I don't remember how I got indoors, but I remember waking up on the bathroom floor the next morning feeling perfectly fine. No sign of a hangover, or anything, which solidified my belief I was never drunk to begin with and was definitely spiked. In the voice of comic book guy, worst first date ever. That is completely fricked up. Glad you got home safe, could have been a disaster. Showing up late and not texting ahead of time. You're not playing it cool if you're 20 minutes late without saying anything. The amount of anxiety that would give me, especially as I'm a person who has to be 15 minutes early. Once, I was talking to this girl online, and things were going pretty well, so we decided to go for dinner. I showed up to the place 5 minutes early, so I waited, and kept waiting. Texted her 15 minutes after we were scheduled to meet, but didn't get a response. Waited for another 45 minutes then left. She messaged me later saying that she wasn't there because she lives in Indonesia. I live in New Jersey. Finding out that the reason why they asked you out is because they wanted to make their ex jealous. To make it worse, she had her friend invite the ex-boyfriend as well. Yikes, at that point I'd tell the ex what she's doing so he can run. Smelly, greasy hair, and no effort in appearance. If the first date isn't important enough for you to even shower, then how important will the relationship be to you? 100% agree. Last date I went on, pre-COVID. He turned up unwashed and in a wrinkly shirt. The shirt didn't really bother me. The deal breaker was his pungent body odor. Showed up late getting all done up. Told via text, it was in a ratty hoodie, and her clothes smelled musty. Super shy, quiet, barely spoke, even when asked innocuous questions, until the movie started. Then she wouldn't shut the frick up, kept staring at me, and asking the dumbest questions like how'd you get so tall? Do you like movies? So, yeah, that sounds like someone who popped something that took a little while to kick in. Dang. Starting the date by saying that you've cleared your entire weekend, just in case this date works out and I'm free, no pressure. Making me do all the work, conversation wise. I don't mind being the lead driver, but you need to at least pull your own weight. I've been on some dates that felt more like interviews. I would try everything I could to get an actual conversation going, but they ended up as Q&A sessions. I went to see a movie with a girl who I'd been talking to for a few weeks. We went to see a movie and she starts sucking her thumb like a baby while watching the movie. I'm thinking weird tick I guess, but okay. Halfway through the movie she gets really emotional, drops to the floor and starts rolling around like a toddler. After about 10 minutes she gets up and acts like nothing happened. I don't know what to say at this point. At one point during the day she's telling me about another date she went on where she saw her friend halfway through and was speaking to her and the guy just walked off without saying bye or anything. As she's telling me this we bump into a girl she knows. They're talking for a bit and I try to introduce myself but she cuts me off to talk about something different. They're both acting like I'm not even there. This goes on for fricking 30 minutes. Half an hour of me just standing there like a dickhead as if I don't know either of them while it seems like they're both actively ignoring me. I try to say goodbye but it's literally like I'm completely invisible. I figure at that point either she didn't like me and somehow planned this intervention from her friend to save blatant turning me down, or she's just a rude person, so I just walk away. I get on the bus to go home and I get a message, "Hey, why did you walk away?" I was 17 at the time and it's the strangest date I've ever been on to this day. Halfway through the movie she gets really emotional, drops to the floor and starts rolling around like a toddler. After about 10 minutes she gets up and acts like nothing happened. What the actual frick? When we plan an actual date where we meet up somewhere, and at the last minute they bail, but wait, they're still free. All you have to do is go to their house. No. So, basically manipulation. If you manipulate me just once, I'm done. I'd say if I'm not worth leaving your house for, this isn't going to work. A guy where I worked was hitting on a girl on the lunch truck for over a month. She fillily said she would go out with him. So for the first date he took her to a XXXP show. Apparently she excused herself to go to the bathroom after a few minutes and never came back. I felt so sorry for her. I would have been scared out of my mind to be with someone that off. My mom had this happen to her. She said no over and over to this guy, until finally she gave it a shot and said yes. He took her to a porno drive-in and then tried to pretend that he hadn't known and that they should stay. She absolutely refused and pitched a huge fit so he would take her home. Asking me to suck his dong before even having a real conversation. This actually happened. To this day, I still don't know how to say his name or where is he from. Ugh, I've been there. It's annoying to get ready for a date and then just leave 2 minutes into it. When I ask someone out on a date, especially a first date, I expect that I will pay for the date. If it's a restaurant I don't make a big deal about me paying and I don't care if she makes any offer to pay or not. It's okay if I pay, or she pays, or we split, but I'll assume I'm paying and at least sincerely try if she's okay with it. But it is a deal breaker when I think she's assumed I will be paying and orders extra expensive stuff because she thinks it will be free to her. My buddy went on a date, and the woman ordered 2 entrees, so she could take one home for later. Brazen about it. That's just taking advantage of someone, which is absolutely a deal breaker. If someone does this, it's pretty indicative that they, for some reason, believe they're entitled to the other person's generosity and they have zero respect for it. I'm someone who will always pay for the first date, but if someone was being blatantly disrespectful like that, I'd leave them with the bill. Keeping talking about herself and the same subject. Evening. Went on a blind date once and this girl kept talking about a single trip she made 5 months prior and her dang bunny. It's all cute and stuff, but when I tried to say something about my pets or travel experience it would always go back to her. Also when I tried to steer the conversation away from anything but those 2 subjects she'd return after 4 minutes somehow. Big turn off. Going on a dinner, or lunch, breakfast, etc. date and ordering nothing because you ate before you came or aren't hungry. It's incredibly awkward to be the person on the other side of that since you showed up hungry and now you're supposed to just eat in front of the other person. Like, that's not weird. If I'm ever single again and this happens again, I'm just going to go home. I once made dinner for the man, who sat there, not eating anything, and then said he had to leave early because he had a dinner date, and I never bothered to even speak to him again. On my first date with a guy, he proceeded to tell me he'd had sex with 16 women and I could be lucky number 17, and then told me he generously rated me a 6/10. Solid move, dude. Solid move. This wasn't a first date, as she had told me she just wanted to be friends after that, but we did one friend date after. And this basically killed it. Let's go to Chick-fil-A, orders something for herself and then asks me if I want anything. Yeah, I'll just have a shake. We get to window and she turns to me, I'm kinda broke and don't have that much on me, can you pay? I would be fine with it if she had just asked me before if I minded buying her something, but to phrase it like she was the one paying and then switching it up on me, I'm just being used. To the server, gotta cancel that sandwich. It will be just the shake, thanks. Well, on one first date I had, the dude told me he used to be in a gang and killed 6 people, drove us into oncoming traffic, told me that there were 3 loaded guns in the car. This ride lasted at least 45 minutes there and back, and told me he was bipolar and was not taking any medication for it. But the deal breaker was when he stopped to get coffee at Taco Bell. The most distressing fact I learned was that Taco Bell sells coffee. Apparently some women can have profoundly poor hygiene, and also apparently there are smells that I am unable to power through. I wouldn't even judge a little body odor if it was just that. I mean, she could be nervous or just forgot the deodorant or something if that were the case, but I'm talking a foul miasma that lingered in my car for a couple days. Somewhere between Horse Girl and Smash Player. She also didn't wear underwear because of it being too much of a hassle. LOL, I'm sorry I lost it at Smash Player, LOL. I went on a date once with a guy who seemed lovely, funny, interesting and charming. We had dinner and ordered a bottle of wine. About 45 minutes in, I went to pour my second small glass of the evening. He picked up my glass, downed it in one and said, "1 glass is enough for a woman. I need you sober for what I'm going to do to you later." There was not a second date. Reading these comments has simultaneously eliminated my dating anxiety. Can't really screw the pooch worse than these guys. They are setting the bar pretty low, and made me lose more faith in humanity. Crossing a simple boundary I placed. Had a first date where a guy held my hand while I was driving, and I said I'm not really much of a hand holder and put my hand back on the wheel. He took my hand back and said, "Thank you for your sacrifice." This dance went on for the rest of the date. This guy also lifted his sweatshirt to reveal a t-shirt that had Jesus on it, which said "I never said that," and asked what I thought of his shirt. Felt like a weird test. Rudeness to anyone. They're supposed to be on their best behavior at this time, so it's a major red flag if they're not trying to be. If they're rude on the first date, it's safe to assume they are on their best behavior. Best to just relate my all-time favorite worst first date and ultimate deal breaker. A friend set me up on a date with one of her co-workers that I'd only met once at her place of employment. The only time I had available was a Saturday right before my yoga class, so we agreed to meet up at a place I'd never eaten at. Mind you, the date who'd eaten there before suggested a place that was near where my class was. I show up wearing my yoga clothes, no pockets, loose-fitting sweat, no pockets, and a small 4x5-inch fanny pack. No pockets relevant later. We have lunch. Everything was going great. Then just before the bill arrives, the date goes to the bathroom, comes back, still having a great time. We finish our meal. The bill comes. 50/50 split. All of a sudden the date can't find their large motorcycle type wallet their money in it, then proceeds to accuse me of stealing it while they were in the bathroom and putting in my pocket. I stood up pointing out that I didn't have any pockets, opened my fanny pack to show other than $20. My and gym membership card. It was too small to fit anything as big as your standard sized motorcycle wallet. It didn't matter that I had 20 witnesses who verified that I never left my seat, much less the restaurant. The idiot date proceeded to throw a Kevin Karen sized tantrum demanding to search my car. So I gave the waitress my ID, then had her call the cops to escort me and the idiot out to my car and proved I did not have the wallet or anything else in there. Idiot comes back in, cop takes a report, leaves, and then idiot proceeds to claim that the waitress and I are friends and in cahoots, that we stole it and the waitress is hiding the wallet in the back. I reiterate, you chose this place. I do not know anyone here. I've never been here before since I'd only brought enough to cover my meal. I ended calling my stay-at-home mother sister to come there and lend me enough cash to cover the whole bill. Skipped my yoga class and went home in a huff. Called my friend, told her what happened. She was shocked. Monday rolls around. Idiot gets to work, opens their desk, and boom, there's the wallet. Idiot call me to say I'm so sorry and wants to know if can we please have a do-over date. My response: oh heck to the no. Insult me by calling me a liar and a thief. Stiff me double the full $40 bill. Invade my privacy by demanding to search my car. You had your chance. You blew it and you can rot in heck for all I care. I can't believe he had the nerve to ask for another date, lol. Showing up to the date late on C, broke, and hoping I'll buy them liquor, then expecting I'll be cool hanging at her place with her and her boyfriend because he is pretty chill. That is how my last date went. Scraping at the bottom of the barrel doesn't even begin to cover WTF I just read. One-sided conversation, aka myself driving the conversation constantly and them putting in zero effort or giving one-worded replies. Always on their phone, reeking of ciggies, drugs, talking about their ex all the time, making zero efforts to even be interested. being more than 30 minutes late without notifying me. This isn't necessarily a date, but we went out with a group of people one time and a few of them just berated the wait staff for absolute nonsense. Nope, not hanging out with you ever again. But sticking with that, I always try to notice how people treat waiters, especially if a mistake is made. If you are cool about it, you've made a good impression on me. I think seeing how someone handles an error is a really interesting measure. If someone can kindly report that there is a mistake or, in the instance of a small error, eat the meal anyway, that says a lot. If he's driving really fast on purpose, once in the restaurant obviously rude to waiter, and afterwards if he tries anything super sexual, I've had dude pull their dong out, literally, outside of BJ's. 2 first dates stand out. First one, we met on Tinder, talked for a couple weeks and hit it off fairly well. Meet up for first date and there's 3 problems. She doesn't look like her pics, smells like a 100-year-old ashtray that's never been emptied, and approximately 30 minutes in she pulls out a kilo of coke that she was supposed to bring to some guy while we're on our date and asked if I wanted some. After I rudely ended our date, she gave my phone number to all of her friends, her brothers, and her father. After weeks of threats from them, I finally got P and told her father to stop threatening me for telling off his coke dealing spawn. He immediately apologized, said that he thought she was out of that life and said he'd never bother me again. He also told everyone else what had actually gone down and they all apologized in time. Second one was going great at first. We were getting lunch and talking about random stuff when she brings up her exes. More specifically, their penises. She described, in graphic detail, the fact that she had never been with a guy that had a small penis, compared her first boyfriend to a 16-ounce Bud Light can, and her most recent ex to a foot-long hot dog from Sonic. Literally. She then said that she was tired of massive freaking dongs and said that the main reason she wanted to go out with me was because she wanted to try out something small, and before I could excuse myself from her life, she attempted to grope my crotch in the restaurant. Let it be known, I had never spoken about my penis, nor had she seen it. After I managed to get away, I blocked her on everything. I'm surprised someone would offer you coke from a brick worth tens of thousands of dollars. Whoever that is for ain't freaking around and will undoubtedly weigh it. Trying to force me to kiss you by grabbing my face so hard that it leaves thumb-shaped bruises on my jawline. For 2 weeks. Literally kissing me with an unhinged jaw and being all tongue. See, Harry Potter basilisk trying to eat you. Taking me to a secluded spot and whipping your dong out to play with it just BC I had kissed you a few times. Then, not stopping when I wanted to leave. Serious lack of self-control there. Telling me I could be hot if I tried working out a little bit because I had the makings for a hot body. He wasn't even fit himself. Your real name not being what you told me it was when we met and first chatted online. ETA. He changed it to sound hot BC. He thought his real name was why he wasn't getting matches dates. Making me listen to you loudly recite poetry as if it were open mic night in a brightly lit bubble tea cafe. Political religious debates. Even if I agree with your views, just know, ETA, not a conversation. The topic itself is fine for me, but not ranting and holding a one-sided debate. I'm going to pretend all of this was one guy. Completely different beliefs and politics. I've had multiple guys bring me a Bible and segue into asking me to dinner to teach me about the Lord. They never understood why I wasn't excited. Missionary dating is the worst. Any comment that suggests they're insecure about themselves, i.e. a criticism of something that's clearly projection. I bet you got your job by batting your eyelashes. I've been trying to get into X job for ages and it's too hard. Or anything that tries to or succeeds in making me second guess myself, my instincts. I once asked her, first date to leave and let me eat in peace because he started lecturing me on not eating a burger if I wanted to look like my skinny like a 12-year-old boy sister. Rudeness, patronizing behavior, arrogance, talking about exes, like seriously if you ain't over them then take that somewhere else and away from me. Talking about an ex, or only talking about themselves and not expressing any interest in me. Sometimes I think guys think a date is a time to brag about how smart you are or how great you are. Just be relaxed. When in doubt, ask her about herself and be a good listener. Hopefully she will do the same. If they spend the whole time looking bored and disinterested, at least pretend you're having fun, or tell me you want to go home. Don't make me sit here uncomfortably for 2 hours and give me one-word answers constantly. Talking about all the conspiracy theories they believe in. No, Chaz, it isn't a commonly held belief that all of the US presidents descended from the same bloodline. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.